Region 2, and it extends from Fillmore, Santa Paula, all the way up to the Bay Area. And so I take care of approximately 2021 public agencies and I act essentially as your risk manager. And let me back up a little bit and give you a little bit of history of the California JPIA. Back in the 70s, mid-70s, commercial insurance was becoming increasingly expensive, and it was very difficult for municipalities, especially smaller municipalities, to afford commercial insurance. So there were 33 cities that joined forces in Southern California and formed a joint power authority. And that was the Southern California Joint Insurance Association. That morphed into what we have today, approximately 120 public agencies. We have essentially 40 cities that belong to the California JPIA. The rest of them are districts, park districts, open space districts, fire authorities, and so on and so forth. So about 120 members. And the way that we're different from commercial insurance or from a large insurance company is that you own us. You make up the membership of the California JPIA. Our board of directors are made up from elected members from the members that belong to the JPIA. Our executive board are elected city office holders within our membership in the JPIA. So everything we do is governed by the members of the JPIA. Now, we offer insurance services and coverage, property coverage, liability coverage, workers' compensation coverage. We also have, we can extend optional coverages for pollution, cyber crime, those special events, those types of coverages. Everybody who belongs to the California JPIA, it's mandatory that you're part of our liability program. So we underwrite that. We're a first dollar type of coverage, so if something happens, we immediately pay for it through the California JPIA. Now, even though we offer insurance services, we think of ourselves as a risk management company. That's really what our forte is. And again, that separates us from commercial insurance carriers that wouldn't provide you with a regional risk manager to show up at your city council meeting, to work with your city manager, to work with staff members. And one product that we provide, or service that we provide, is called the loss cap program. And what that is we come in, we do a risk management evaluation of your city. We look at everything, facilities, operations, administration, everything that goes on here, we take a look at it to make sure that you're compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, with Cal OSHA, you name it, FEHA, all down the line of all the requirements that you have to deal with on a daily basis here. We come in, we do that evaluation, and through that evaluation, we produce action items. We come back after we've done the evaluation, we provide the report, we sit down with the city manager and with other department heads, and we go over what those action items are. And we work with you to make sure that those action items are completed. It could be doing a self-evaluation for an ADA program here within the city. It could be a sidewalk inspection and maintenance program, a tree inspection maintenance program. There are a number of action items that this evaluation can produce, and we're here to help you to accomplish that. We also have launched initiatives through the California JPIA. By tracking your losses through liability claims and workers' comp claims, we know what the trends are. We know where the injuries are occurring. So we've implemented programs in the workers' comp area. We have a return to work program, and we have what's called company nurse. So now employees, when they get hurt, they can actually call a nurse who's available 24 hours a day and talk through the injury. A lot of times that may prevent a trip to the hospital that would exacerbate that workers' comp claim. On the liability side, we have programs like our ADA initiative. And what that is that we have partnered with an outside consultant to come in and do a self-evaluation throughout the city to help you determine where your barriers are when it comes to being compliant with ADA. We also have we've launched a sidewalk inspection and maintenance pilot program. We've taken the top 10 members in our pool and determine who has the most trip and fall claims. And we're going out, again, partnering with another company to inspect the city, walk every inch of sidewalk that's within the city boundaries, and determining what we can do to help, whether that's grinding, whatever repairs that we can help the city do in order to reduce your exposure to trip and fall claims. So those are some of the initiatives, some of the things that we do from the California JPIA that help the city of Ojai to be compliant, but most importantly for your employees, the staff members, to work safely, make sure they get home safely at night, and make sure that the citizens are safe as they walk your sidewalks, walk through your parks, the children are playing in the playgrounds. We have a playground inspection program. So all of these things are aimed at loss prevention, risk management, and that's really what our forte is. So that's my brief little spiel on the California JPIA. I've been in the risk management field for over 20 years. I've only been with the California JPIA for close to a year now, and I can tell you the training that we provide for staff is unparalleled. You're not going to find that anywhere in the insurance industry. So I'm proud to be part of the California JPIA. I think we represent you well. You have a fantastic staff here that is very risk averse and risk conscious, and work with us to make sure that we're doing everything that we can to minimize your risk. So
Appreciate it.
I'll open it up to any questions.
Any questions for Mr.
Thank
Angel?
you, Roy. I just have one
Mayor
question
Pro
of
Tem
staff. Are we utilizing the services that Roy mentioned as far as our sidewalks and other risky areas of city operations?
Yes, we are generally. We do meet with him regularly and go through the loss cap and follow up on those items.
Now, do you check to see whether we followed up on it, so that that'll generate a premium reduction, or how does that work?
Well, because you belong to a risk pool, what you do here affects San Luis Obispo or affects Grover Beach or some of our cities down south. So everybody's kind of taking a look at it and making sure that all the cities, all the members are doing what they need to do. Yeah, part of that loss cap program is we have software that tracks all the action items, and it will tell me where the city stands as far as completion of those action items. So if there's been an open action item that's been sitting out there for 6 months to a year, I make sure I give Steve a call and we have a conversation about, I come here and I work with maybe the Public Works Director, whoever it might be that's in charge of that, and we make sure that that gets taken care of.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Wyrick?
Are you allowed to offer coverages for contracted city services or contracted with non-municipal organizations that are providing city services? Can you provide optional coverages, and can those be, are they free to basically get a quote from you and from a commercial?
Generally, no. If it's a
Okay.
contracted service like the Sheriff's Department or a fire district, they certainly can become a part of the
Okay.
JPIA, and we can offer coverages through those means. But kind of piggybacking off of what the coverage that you have, no.
Okay.
We are looking at,
I was thinking about optional add-on coverages.
yeah, and we're looking at different paradigms because we do have, there are a couple of other joint power authorities here throughout the state, one of them down in San Diego that dissolved, and they had, I believe it was 15 members, and the 15 members were scrambling trying to figure out what they're going to do. They had a kind of a different paradigm down there. They weren't first dollar, they had self-insured retentions, and so we're looking at different models to try to accommodate some of these other agencies out there. They're kind of scrambling to find out where they're going to land.
All right. Thank you.
Councilmember Haney?
Roy,
Yes.
the new sequel, AB 52, is your agency looking into that and seeing how cities are going to adopt that or enhance their existing policies?
You said CEQA?
Yes.
So environmental issues?
Yeah, technically, respectfully, I think it's AB 52 is the new law that's come into effect. Are you going to be looking at cities and looking at how their general plans are written, and then how this new CEQA law is going to be applied to individual cities' general plans, and how they're going to interact with that new look at cultural resources in cities?
Yeah, we certainly can. I haven't had that request so far from a member, but we have a stable of defense attorneys, contracted attorneys, that we can approach, those who specialize in CEQA and other environmental issues when it comes to public agencies. And so, yeah, we can certainly address that. Again, I haven't had that particular question from a member agency, so.
Okay, thank you.
No more questions? No, and I just want to thank you for coming out and just giving us a summary about what you guys do. I had the pleasure to go to your board meeting up in La Palma, and it was very interesting, very informative, and I'm glad that the city of Ojai is a member and taking advantage of your services.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank
And
you, Mr. Angel.
we're glad to have you. So
Thank you. Thanks. Our second presentation is going to be by Patty and Sue Williamson, and it's about the citrus psyllid and pesticides. Thank you.
Okay, well, we're going to start out, actually, Sue is going to handle the first part of it, so.
Okay, our theme is Don't Guess, Test. We are asking the Ojai City Council to commit to 2 actions, both of which are already being done in Santa Barbara. The first one is to set aside monies to be used for the regular testing of imidacloprid and pyrethroids, I'm not very good at pronouncing these chemicals, in our air, water, and earth. We feel the testing is the only way we will know our level of local exposure and appropriate actions to take as a result of our exposure. And we've done some research on the cost of testing. It's about $1,200 for 3 samples to test for neonicotinoids at one lab, and $395 per sample to test for the pyrethroids at CalTest labs. The same prices are to test water or soil. The second thing we recommend is that the Ojai Valley residents use organic products and gardening techniques. This will help decrease the amount of pesticides potentially running off into the waterways or flying up into the air in the form of toxin-drenched dust. Jill Murray, who's the Santa Barbara Creeks Division Water Quality Research Coordinator, as well as the head of the Santa Barbara Beekeepers Association, have stated that in Santa Barbara they're finding imidacloprid in places where it shouldn't be, like runoff from parking lots and pavements. This indicates that the imidacloprid that is drenched in the soil beneath citrus trees is likely then blown into the air as dust. And we couldn't show the video because for some reason it wasn't working, but they were surprised to find this in the water in Santa Barbara. At the area-wide pest management program meeting held on December 5th, 2014 in Oxnard, the state's featured expert, Dr. Beth Grafton Cardwell, entomologist at UC Riverside, said that there was no evidence that the pesticide spraying would buy more than a few extra years for citrus producers, and even so, those 2 to 3 years would be at a very expensive cost. They found that the chemicals are ineffective. The chemical sprays have not held back the disease for more than a couple years at great cost, for example, in Florida. Eventually, the pest and the disease have always taken over in chemically managed groves. So it's really sort of a futile program. The poison moves out and up the food chain in all directions. It kills far more than just the Asian citrus psyllid. It kills bees, bats, butterflies, lizards, toads, salamanders, and songbirds, swallows, skylarks, yellowhammers, wagtails, starlings, whitethroats, on and on. It's particularly harmful to humans and pets. For instance, cats are very adversely affected by it. Is that
So,
right?
what we want to do is not just tell you about the bad news, but we can
Could you talk into the mic,
Okay.
Patty?
Sorry.
Thank you. So-
The good news is that we do have an answer for it. We can create healthy citrus by creating healthy soil. And the way you create healthy plants is by creating the microbiology in the soil. And really, we want people to understand, this is not just from me, but from experts, that citrus greening disease is not a death sentence to the citrus industry. A number of organic advisors are stating that they can control the pest and reverse the disease using natural materials and organic means. So one of the main people, Dr. Elaine Ingham, who is a world-renowned soil microbiologist, is stating that if you maximize the diversity and strength of the life in the soil, you'll suppress the pest and disease-causing organisms, you'll produce good soil structure, on, improving everything about agriculture. And we wanted to show a clip, but that obviously isn't going to happen. If you're interested, I can send you this link. It's really worth watching the 3 minutes that I listed here. One of Dr. Ingham's students, Stanley Thornton, has developed a line of soil amendments and foliar sprays and microbes that brings dying trees back to life. There's another man in India, Ojai Valley, who has another program that is similar, using microbials. And so I just want to emphasize that there is an answer. We don't have to put poisons in our air, on our on the land here, which blows up and into the dust, as Sue was talking about. And then another person, Steve Pavich, he is a longtime organic farmer. He's been experimenting, doing a similar kind of work, showing that you can reverse the citrus greening disease. So we want to keep you posted about the upcoming workshop that they're planning regarding organic alternatives to create healthy citrus. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Patty or Sue Williams?
I do.
Mayor
I have a
Pro Tem?
question. Thank you very much for the information. And I agree with you. However, it seems like you should be talking to the county rather than the city. The vast majority of our citrus is not located within the city limits.
Well, the thing is that the CDFA is coming into the city limits and spraying in people's backyards. And so that's the reason I want to come to the city as well. We are planning to take this information to the county. But I think it's really important for Ojai to protect the city. And then with your blessings, that will help the county to listen as well, because they have a much larger, conventional base that they're concerned with.
Right, but what I'm saying is you're asking for money to be set aside for testing, and even if we were to ban it within the city limits, it doesn't do us a lot of good to test, because we're going to see a detection of things that are done outside the city limits in the county.
Right. Well, we can ask the county to help us out with that. And I know that the Santa Barbara City has set aside monies to do it in their city, not the county. And the way they did it was using monies that had to do, that came from hotel tax. So I don't know if that's anything that Ojai can work out to help with this, but that's what the city.
My only concern is Santa Barbara's a large city, and we're in a valley, and anything that happens outside the city limits is going to affect us regardless of what we say or do.
Right.
Well, there is the fact, though, that people can refuse to have their backyards sprayed. And if the city council comes out with some kind of a positive statement about encouraging organics, and, that could be helpful to encourage people to realize they don't have to be sprayed and there are other alternatives. And that's really important, because, every time they spray somebody's backyard, they're going to be affecting some pets, bees, everything in the valley. So I think that it could be a positive step if you took it,
Now, when you say when they spray, who are you talking about, they?
the county.
The CDFA, the California Department of Food and Agriculture,
Yeah.
came in just about a month and a half ago, I believe, and they sprayed 400 properties, and they've done it several times in the past several months around the Ojai area. But this last time was in city limits, and that's when we came and talked about it last time.
Okay.
So it's really to create awareness, and if, as in Santa Barbara, they recommend, they put it out in their information that people use organic methods and products, and that's something I think that Ojai can do to recommend. And also, if you're willing to have some sort of monetary input to get the testing done, then Ventura could do maybe most of it. I'm not sure how you want to.
Councilmember Clapp?
Lost my train of thought, but it seems to me that it wouldn't be that difficult to have a link put on our website so that people could see what the alternatives are. That would be a simple approach to at least make people informed that there's other methodologies. Also, I wasn't aware they sprayed in the city. I'm thinking that maybe we should also require them to notify the city so the city can notify the citizens when the spraying is going to occur, so at least people are aware of it and they can take in pets indoors, or they can leave town if they have the ability to do so while it's happening. And the third thing is, I think that, what was my third thing? I'm sorry, I can't think of the third one. If I think of it, I will. But I think it's really important that we as a city notify people that it's occurring, and then we at least provide a link so that people know that it's happening. And the third thing is, our budget's already been done for the year. I'm not aware of any sort of funds that have been allocated to do the testing. I understand why you want to do it, and I agree that we need to move more and more towards bioremediation rather than chemical remediation for problems. So I support your support, and I also agree with Mr. Blatz that you should go to the county, because it is true most of our ag is outside of the city limits. Thanks.
We also, it would be an idea maybe to put a link on there to where individuals could do testing.
That could be part of it.
'Cause individuals can do the
What the
testing.
possibilities are that
Yeah.
they can use in their own yard, and also where testing can occur if they want to do it.
Yeah.
And would that be a problem, Mr. Clark, for the city to do a link? If they provided all the information and all we had to do was a link, so you did all the homework, so our staff isn't burdened with more work.
Sure.
You give the information to the city, and the city could put a link. Is that something that is appropriate?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you.
Great, thank you.
Councilmember Haney?
Yeah, I believe in what you're trying to achieve. I guess my skepticism comes into when you say inorganic methods cost more than organic methods, yet I don't see any proof of that. In fact, inorganics were created, synthetic methods of treating pests were created to be cost effective. And that's one of the arguments that I hear from some of the farmers in the community is, it'd be great if we could all do organic, but I got 20, 30 acres of citrus, and how do I maintain 20, 30 acres of citrus organically versus having the ability to quickly assess the problem or the pest and deal with it. So I would just like to see some type of measure on costs from inorganic to organic.
That would be
That's-
something to put on the website.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think that'd be helpful to demonstrate the beneficial qualities of one versus the other.
Right.
Okay?
Councilmember Wyrick?
Just a quick question. Are you aware of any growers that are experimenting, trying pilot projects with alternative methods that you've described in the valley?
Well, in the valley, we don't have any of the greening disease yet. It's been mainly in other parts of the country, like Florida. So there's some in Mexico and in India. And I know that they found some psyllids in the Los Angeles area near Hacienda Heights, where the original plant was infected, was brought in from some other country and had some of the greening disease on it. So we haven't had it yet, so we can't, it has to be set up in a very controlled We
Right.
don't want to bring green disease
And
here.
that's what I'm asking. Are
Yeah.
are the commercial growers prohibited from trying, saying, here's some part of our acreage we don't want you to spray? If anything is detected, or are they by law required?
The growers have to do something, and if they're conventional, they can do whatever they want. They can use the
They
conventional.
have an alternative program that would give them an exemption to try it?
Well, if they're organic, they can use the organic alternative.
I'm just curious what the options are, that's all.
Yeah. It does cost more
Right.
to use the organic alternative.
Kind of adding to Councilperson Haney's comment. Yeah.
So when you say organic, certified organic, or organic, if, someone says they're organic is one thing, but being certified organic, is that what you're saying? That there's a difference between if someone can opt out if they're certified organic?
I know that they have to take some action according to the CDFA and the county, and so it's really up to them. They have to take some kind of action.
Okay.
I do appreciate the presentation you gave us. I know you made us aware of what was happening about a month and a half ago, and at that meeting, we did ask staff to come back or try to communicate with CDFA and see if there was some type of workshop that they could provide about spraying, and also updating us on the notification process.
Yeah, there felt like there was some defects in the notification.
Yeah.
And we directed that be cured.
Yeah.
We contact them about better notifications.
And I know that we do have pesticides as an item to talk about tomorrow. I personally find it a benefit if we were to do the testing here. I understand what Mayor Pro Tem Blatt says about we might detect some spraying from the valley, but I think that it would never harm us to work with the county. I know most of agriculture is back there, but the one spraying in the city is CDFA, and which is different than commercial. Commercial is more of the agriculture, the county agriculture. So they're two different agencies that are participating to eliminate or prevent the green disease from coming to California. So whatever steps we could do, and I do understand that to a certain degree that non-organic is less expensive than organic, but what you have to take in consideration is a health risk, and that's a lot more expensive than using organic. And so there's intangibles here that can't be identified in concrete numbers other than like prices. So I just want to make sure that I make that clear that, yeah, there is a difference there, but we need to be conscious, I think, to the needs of our community and our residents in discussing this, and hopefully we could bring it up tomorrow. And any communications you have with the county, please share. Please keep us updated. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Any further comments? No? With that, then, thank you. That's the rest of our presentation. Right now, we're going to go into public communication. Is a time set aside during the meeting for members of the public to address the city council successor agency board on items of city business other than scheduled agenda items. Matters raised at the time may be briefly discussed by the council board and will be generally be referred to staff and or place on the subsequent agenda. Under state law, other than the emergency items, no actions can be taken. Person wishing to address a council board are requested to fill out a speaker's card prior to the council board reaching this point on the agenda. Comments must be limited to 3 minutes or less. Our first speaker's card is from Mr. Hanford from the Golden State Water Company. And if this is an update on the current water reduction or any type of water situation in our city, feel free to go over the 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. Good evening. Robert Hanford, General Manager, Coastal District for Golden State Water Company. So I just want to give a little bit of background. When the State Water Resources Control Board implemented their emergency conservation measures on May 18th, they made the assumption that all water purveyors who file an urban water management plan with Department of Water Resources every 5 years, that all those, because of simply the fact that they do file this plan, are a urban water supplier under the California Water Code. So we were taking a look at this, and as I shared with the council at the first council meeting in June, this is unknown territory. All these regulations were passed in a series of a few weeks in April and May, and we're all getting used to dealing with them. So we took a look at this, and on August 5th, we wrote a letter to the State Water Resources Control Board challenging the classification of Ojai as an urban water supplier. And we felt it was not appropriate because two of the criteria defined in the California Water Code, the number of customers and the consumption, neither of these criteria were met. So that was on August 5th, and on August 20th, we received a response to our challenge, and the State Water Resources Control Board agreed that Ojai should not be classified as an urban water supplier. So what's the impact of this? As typically with most small systems in the state of California that are not urban water suppliers, they have a less stringent conservation requirement to meet, which is twice a week watering or 25% conservation. So as typical in all of our other small systems, going forward, the conservation requirement in compliance with the state mandate will be twice a week watering. And that all sounds good, but that's a regulatory requirement. As we know, in the Ojai Basin, with the system that we serve the city, we have groundwater and we have surface water. And we know the challenges we're facing with surface water in Lake Casitas and the challenges we're facing with groundwater as water levels drop. So far, our wells have been in pretty good shape. We're still producing water. They're still active. But what I wanted to share with the council, and as we're already doing right now with the press, is just because we have this lessened regulatory conservation requirement does not mean we should let off our guard. The citizens of Ojai have done an excellent job in voluntary water conservation. They've done just an excellent job. But we still face these physical limitations in our water supply. And there could be a situation where we have to go at some time in the future. These stages I talked about in June, right now we're in stage 1, which is still in effect. We have twice a week watering, there's no water wasting, there's no watering of hardscape surfaces. All those rules are still in effect, but that's not to say that if something unanticipated happens with our surface water supply or our groundwater supply, that we may not have to go into a higher stage, not based on some regulatory requirement, but just based on physical limitations. So I guess that's the main point. We've updated our website tonight. We've already spoken to the Ventura Star and Ojai Valley News. We just wanted to get the word out that, yes, everyone's doing a good job, they should be commended, and we should continue to do a good job conserving water. And hopefully we have a good winter.
Okay, great. Councilmember Clapp?
You say that they don't call us urban anymore, but you didn't refer to the 36% reduction mandate. Are they still requiring that?
No, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear. The only conservation requirement is twice a week watering.
Oh, so
for small systems.
we're no longer under this 36% mandate of reduction?
Yes, I'm sorry, I wasn't clear on that point. That is correct.
Whoopee.
Yeah.
Boy, I think everybody's going to be relieved at that because everybody's letting their trees die.
Well, what we see happening though is, and we still have to report the production numbers to the state every week, and we still track it internally. And I will continue to keep the city and the city council management and city council informed on our status, because this isn't, a license to give up conserving water. We really have to conserve that resource.
I think everybody understands that, but I think now the threat of being fined is eliminated, and the threat of putting restrictors on your faucet or your water supply has been eliminated, but you're still making it clear that we need to be conservative.
Right, and that's absolutely accurate. We're in stage 1, and none of those would come into play unless we had some untoward event and we had to go to a higher stage due to an emergency.
Well, I thank you, in spite of all of the controversy around Golden State Water in this city. I have to thank you for having taken those steps to get that ridiculous requirement removed from us.
I think that we're the first and only agency to be successful with this so far.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you.
Councilmember Wyrick?
Couple of things I want to bring up. I know I talked to you earlier. My questions probably aren't something that you may not be able to respond to, but I think it's worth bringing them out. First of all, for the record, this urban water management plan was first presented years ago in a public hearing. I'm not sure if you were there or not. And at that public hearing, yes, we had one here.
No, but he
Yeah.
wasn't
No, he wasn't here, yeah.
No.
A lot of people warned against the possibility of being misclassified by the option that Golden State was taking to do the urban water management plan. It was optional, not required. It was put into the rate base. In other words, the studies paid for by the ratepayers. And one of the things at the time was pretty clear was that the 2010 census data was not included in that 2010 plan, thereby allowing for a demand projections that increased your RAM charges that you were able to do in the last rate cycle. And in fact, right now, according to your 10Q that just came out with the SEC, GSWC has recorded additional undercollections in the RAM MCBA accounts of $19.3 million. The increase in the RAM balance in 2015 is largely due to water conservation by our customers in response to the ongoing drought conditions. In other words, as we conserve, your revenue base is guaranteed under the current Public Utilities Commission regulatory regime. You are just right now in the middle of a settlement with CPUC that's based on the 36% goal. At 25% goal, are you going to adjust or represent the settlement? In other words, are you going to adjust for the fact that you shouldn't get a double dip if it's a 25% in terms of the ratepayers paying on the basis of a 36%? That's the first question I have, is that the current settlement is based on the urban water management plan. I could contend misprojections dating all the way back to 2010. Second of all, are you going to refrain from using this option of doing an urban water management plan that got us into this problem in the first place in the future, since it is optional? And it's not in the interest of the ratepayers to do the urban management plan.
Let me address your concerns in the order you listed them. Let's go back to 1995. That was the first year we filed an urban water management plan, and typically they're filed on a 5-year interval.
Mm-hmm.
So the first one we filed for Ojai was in 1995, and I wasn't present then, but it's my understanding that the only reason we went through the expense and effort was at the behest of the city to help with a low-income housing effort.
That wasn't the case in 2010. You were asked not
No,
to.
but
you were
once
asked not to do it.
But once you file them, the state anticipates you'll continue to file them.
They're optional in every cycle. Are you saying that's not correct, that they're optional in every cycle?
I'd have to check that.
Okay. And then the last question I want to ask is, this issue was raised at the time, years ago, when you first were presenting the draft of this plan to the ratepayers. Why the delay in asking for this correction of the classification until just recently, when this has been in place in terms of the information you gave to the Water Resources Board a long time ago?
I'm not aware of any delay. The rules were promulgated on May 18th of this year, listing urban water suppliers.
Yeah, that's
to
the
file.
result of the information being presented to, submitted to the.
Right, but the rules
I'm
didn't,
talking,
rules didn't even exist till May 18th, 2015.
okay, all right, I understand. I'm questioning, that's not the information I have, that, you know, in terms of submitting under the urban water management plan was done early on and not just recently.
Correct. They're filed in 5-year intervals, but
Right.
the rule that the state would just wholesale accept an urban water management plan as a designation being an urban water supplier in conformance with the California Water Code was not promulgated till May 18th of 2015.
Well, I don't want to get into a long discussion about, what about my last question? You have a settlement on the current rate cycle. Based
Right.
on the 36%, are you going to adjust what you're asking for under the current rate cycle on the
don't-
25%?
I don't know. I know we are still in the process where we don't have a proposed decision from the ALJ. So I do not know the regulatory requirements to submit adjustments at this stage in the rate case. But I will find out for you and get back to
Thank you.
Mr. Clark.
Okay.
Councilmember Haney?
Well, sir, thank you for the great information regarding the reduction from 36. But is it from 36 to 25? You
No.
said 2 weeks, you said 2 times a week versus 25%?
No, I'm sorry, I should have been more clear. It's twice a week watering is the conservation requirement.
Okay, period.
Period.
So we're all,
Right.
so we all know that.
And then also the water wasting rules of water running off on hardscapes.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay, so I remember last time that you were here, I had asked a pointed question as to what Golden State was doing for us. So obviously you did something really well. Some of us might think it maybe is a little late, but again, I applaud the efforts on Golden State. However, that still brings me back to, what else are you doing? So we're back to this RAM charge again. The citizens of Ojai are reducing their water consumption, and you're still going after some form of a rebate, and I imagine that's based on your system, your delivery system. Is this what the RAM charge is about? You have a system that supplies water to our community, and whether we're using it at 100% capacity or 75% capacity, you still get to recover the 100% capacity rate.
Let me preface my remarks with, I'm an engineer, not a finance person.
Okay.
But as I understand it, it's more than Golden State. It's really an industry-wide issue, because most of the revenue for water purveyors is based on the commodity charge, how much water you consume every month, every 2 months.
And ours is down 32% right now.
Right, and it doesn't matter if you're LA Department of Power and Water, San Francisco PUD, Golden State Water, most of the revenue is based on that variable charge based on consumption. For a water purveyor, water utilities are the most expensive, most capital-intensive utility. They're more capital-intensive than gas, electric, or telecommunications. And most of the costs of providing a water service are fixed. So you have this inherent mismatch between revenues and expenses. And the commission realized that this mismatch back in 2005 when they implemented the California Water Plan. And again, there's no good answer, but unfortunately, historically, we've had this mismatch between revenues and expenses, between fixed and variable costs. My understanding is the modified cost balancing account and the water revenue adjustment mechanism was an effort by the PUC to help recover some of those fixed costs.
Okay, so my contention in where we are right now is, we as a community are doing everything that we can, and you as the water purveyor in our community, I'm just thinking that the majority of us think you should be doing more for us as a community. I don't really care what the rest of California is doing.
Fair enough.
I'm concerned about what you're doing for us and our community. So I know we can go round and round on this, and I'm not going to, but I'm just saying, I think you could waive those RAM charges. Okay, that's how I would look at it, and I bet you if we asked everyone in this room where they would vote on that, they'd probably all raise their hand and say, do it. But you can't make that decision, and I can't make you. So some questions I have regarding billing, though, I do.
But I was going to respond to what we can do for the community. The one thing we can do is to the best possible extent, manage our groundwater supply. Because unlike most other purveyors in this area, we have the luxury, the benefit of both having a surface water source from Casitas and a fairly reliable groundwater well. So, I mean, we treasure those wells. I mean, they're maintained, they're well-maintained, and we monitor those, religiously.
Okay. I had a couple questions, and I don't know if they're relevant now that we don't have the 36% reduction, but I'll ask them anyway. On our monthly statement, and I have a couple of them here, there's nothing on this statement that talks about the 36% reduction. It's kind of like you said we had to do it. In fact, I pulled this one up, showing what I need to do to reduce, but there's nothing that shows it on a monthly basis. How I'm doing, what could I do better, da-da-da-da-da. So I think that's something that you guys might be able to do better. Again, there's no mention of my 2013 baseline anywhere on this. There's no comparison of my usage to that baseline. There was a credit for $1 million that owed us no longer appears. Did they pay us back? Did you guys pay back that $1 million that you owed us?
Right.
There used to be a credit that was on this.
Right. The advice letters are finite. They have a finite term, typically 12, 18, 24 months. And as defined, as ordered by the PEC, when that term expires, they roll off the bill.
So we're expired.
Correct.
Okay. Just want to make, I'm alive. I haven't expired, but we're expired. Okay.
Yeah.
On the back of the very top, there's a heading called Message Center, where they say effective June 1st, 2015, your bill includes an increase to offset the rise in supply expenses. Does anyone know what that is? What's the offset? What does that mean?
Typically, our supply expenses we have three components: purchased power, purchased water, our wholesale water we purchase from Casitas, and also our chemical costs. It could be an increase in cost for any of those three components.
But they're not clearly stated on this.
Right.
They're not broken out, they're just.
No, that is correct.
All right. And I already talked here about the RAM charges, so, again, I'll finish with this. I believe, first of all, I appreciate what you've done. I think you can do more. And I don't know how you can convey that to your higher-ups, but I'm sure the citizens of Ojai would expect more and are looking for more. Thank you.
Very good.
Councilmember Clapp.
One more thing. You're still in the hot seat. You're handling this beautifully. I'm going to read just something real quickly. Golden State Water has implemented surcharges to recover all of its RAM balances as of December 31st, 2014. For the 6 months ending June 30th, 2015, surcharges of approximately $96,000 were billed to customers to recover previously incurred under collections for RAM charges. So it sounds like the Golden State Water customers are already being billed $96,000 for undercharging for RAM. During the 6 months ending June 30th, 2015, which is right now, when this city stepped up and reduced their usage 32% when we were mandated this outrageous 36% reduction, Golden State recorded an additional undercollection in RAM of $19.3 million. The increase in RAM balance in 2015 is larger due to the water conservation of your customers in response to the drought. Lower water usage results in an increase in the undercollection of the RAM charges. So as of June 30th, Golden State Water has a net aggregated regulatory asset of $28.5 million, which is comprised of $26 million of undercollection of RAM charges. So my question is, are you going to bill the Golden State Water customers $26 million on their bills?
Again,
And if you will, over what period of time will that occur?
Right. We can only charge either through advice letter or through the general rate case process what the PUC approves.
It says here that you are in the process of doing that, of going to the CPUC. Has Golden State Water chosen to ask the CPUC to allow you to charge our customers $26 million in RAM charges? Has Golden State Water requested this of the CPUC?
Two things. One, that is a statewide number, not an Ojai number, just to be clear. And second fact.
Oh, you mean the Golden State Water statewide for you as an organization?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, just to set the record straight on
Okay.
that. And the second point is, right now, we're in settlement on the rate case. I don't know what the current settlement position is on this matter.
Well, this brings up an interesting point. Golden State Water has a $28.5 million RAM charges for other customers throughout the state that your company is charging RAM charges to. I hope as an organization that you also take into consideration these other communities that stepped up and reduced their water, and also would consider not charging those customers those additional charges as well. I think that would be very good policy on the part of your company.
I will pass that along.
Thank you for your time.
Any further questions?
I just have one more follow-up,
Yeah.
if I could.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilmember Haney, could you turn on your mic?
Nice try. So, I read your letter to the State Water Resource Control Board, and then I think I pulled up their copy of information. One of the things it states is, as you know, the greatest opportunity to conserve water occurs during the warmer summer months, so quick action now would be critical to meeting your conservation requirements. And then they state further reducing the number of days. These are some actions that you can consider. You have this letter.
Yes, sir.
And then along with it, they have an attachment that you're going to fill out. I imagine they've asked you to fill this out? It's an information order?
Are you referring to the August 11th?
Yes, I am.
That letter is moot now.
Okay. So,
None of this
so none of the,
applies.
information order, you're not going to respond to at all?
It's
And you
not,
don't-
it's not necessary.
Okay, and before we go there, there are a lot of interesting comments here made by them as to help communities to conserve water. So you don't feel that any of these suggestions would be complementary to the citizens of Ojai and how to reduce their water usage?
No, and in fact, I think it's important to see how the community is saving, because even though we're at not required to maintain the 36%, cumulatively, we're at 35% from June 1 to last Sunday, this community is,
Right.
which is fantastic.
Right.
So, I mean, we're doing a good job. I mean, we can always add more to the website and conservation tips. We're continually doing that, but to be at 35% cumulatively since June 1 to August 21st, that's fantastic.
Right, and we've all acknowledged that, but you also acknowledged earlier that let's not get yippee-yay over this. Let's remember that we're still in a drought. So that's why when I look at some of the recommendations that they make on this, I just think it would benefit the community if somehow you could post some of these.
Oh,
I don't know how
that
you
can
do
easily be
it.
done, yes, without question,
Okay,
yeah. If we can be a resource to the citizens, we will.
okay.
And I'm going to take one more comment from
One more,
council.
it's very
before I
brief.
move on.
You're absolutely right, and I was going to ask, are you going to have in the next billing cycle an insert that tells people what the new restrictions are, but within that insert, that we're no longer under 36% mandated reduction, but that they still need to conserve? And I think Mr. Haney's suggestion that these methods in which people can do that should also be included in that insert. Would that be something that the Golden State is planning to do?
Well, it's something we can easily do, not on an insert, but right on the bill itself, because
Okay.
I know when I get my utility bill, the insert usually
That's a good point.
goes away, but I hang on to the bill.
And what about a press release?
We're working with OVN and Ventura Star we started working with them this
Okay,
afternoon.
great, thank you.
So-
What about putting the 2013 base on the bill?
My only hesitation for doing that is we're not in allocations, And none of that is really in play right now, and I don't anticipate it to be in play. I would think additional conservation measures might be where we want to focus our efforts.
Well, I appreciate your presentation, and it would, and if you could please supply or give us the responses to the last two questions Councilmember Wyrick asked, whether the urban plan was optional
Yes.
or not, and then also if you're gonna, if the 25% reduction is gonna be now implemented with this rate case.
Right.
I'm sorry, and also, I would like to have an answer about whether Golden State is planning to ask the CPUC to recuperate the additional RAM charges that were,
The 28 million
yes,
number.
yes. I would like an answer on
course
that
they
as
are.
well.
Of course they are. And I don't know why this is such a surprise for everybody.
Not a
The
surprise.
company has a scheme in which it's operating to the maximum benefit of their shareholders, and we're the victims of it. And we can conserve all we want, but as we conserve, the price we pay is going to go up.
Absolutely.
So that's just a fact of life, and that's why we're in the process of hopefully getting rid of them.
And that RAM was expanded by the misuse of statistics 4 years ago
Exactly.
on the last
Exactly.
urban water management plan, where they overstated population and demand, which set up the difference they could collect in RAM.
Which is why I'm asking them to be ethical and not ask for the money back.
Well, I appreciate
You're gonna
your
ask.
report, Mr. Anfor.
And
We're getting, yeah.
I was just going to offer,
Thank
I
you.
will be back and be providing the council updates.
Thank you
Okay,
very much.
thank you.
Appreciate your good cheer in the midst of all.
Thank you.
You're not responsible for your entire
Well,
company, we understand.
He came in late, he came in very recently. How long have you been on the OBGMA with us?
11 months.
11 months. So he's walked into a lion's nest, lion's lair, a den of wolves, and you're handling it with great aplomb, handling
Thank
it
you
with
very
great
much.
aplomb.
Thank you. We still on public comment, so we still need to get through our meeting. So I'm going to go right ahead with our public comment. Steve Quillisi.
It's fine. Yeah, it'll be
Thank you, Mayor and council members. Steve Quillisi, West Eucalyptus Street in the city. I came to talk about one thing. I just briefly talk about something else, that is the spraying on the Asian citrus psyllids. I have a small, like 3-foot tall lemon tree in my yard, and because we were within a certain distance of where they found some of these bugs in the city, it's not that there haven't been any, but they said they found some, and it was up on North Kenyatta Street. And so for some distance around that, they were required to notify all the property owners and to spray unless you opted out. The notification was great. I got a postcard, and then I got a notice that there was going to be a display at the Chaparral Auditorium, which I went in and learned a lot more, saw the map and all of that stuff. And I felt like we were all adequately notified that spraying was going to take place. In my case, there was just one little tree, and guys dragged 2 hoses into my yard and spent 5 minutes, and we were done. So that worked out all right as far as I was concerned. Second, last night I attended a very interesting meeting of the Ojai Valley Sanitary District Board of Directors. I was, I think half jokingly, asked during the meeting by a couple of board members if I was the new liaison from the Ojai City Council. I said no. No, but I'm sure there's one here somewhere. In fact, I was the only civilian, if you will, that attended the meeting last night. But it was a very important meeting. It had to do with privately owned sewer laterals and the program and the ordinance that will require not only inspections, but cleaning, plugging, pressure testing, and videotaping of the insides of laterals at particular, what they called triggering events, at the sale of a piece of property, at a change of use of a piece of property, if Caro's changed from a restaurant to an organic market. they would have to have one of these. And it's a process to be done by a local plumber and then inspected by the OVSD staff. And it's a process that can cost anywhere from a couple hundred to maybe $1,000, depending on how much of a lateral you have on your property. I think it's an important issue for people in this city, and nobody on this council was there. I'm sure you have an appointed liaison. I don't know who it is. I would be interested to know. I think you ought to have an appointed alternate if that liaison to the OVSD cannot attend. But whether you have one or not, nobody was there, and I think it's a real shame. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to answer your question, who is the?
I am. I plead guilty. I've had a lot of conflicts this summer, and I should have called somebody to be there for me. And I've been doing that for, I bet we don't have an alternate, and we should.
Yeah.
So I plead guilty. I've been following the minutes and talking with the manager of the Ojai Sanitary District about all this, but I wasn't there, and I apologize.
And second of all, I have a question in regards to communicating a direct relationship between our staff and the sanitary district. Rob, do you know if you are in current communication with the sanitary district?
No, we haven't really been.
Is there any reason why we're not, or?
Well, periodically, we've had them come out and give updates to the public, but we really haven't been, as a staff assignment, we really haven't had anybody following them just because of limited resources.
Okay. Well, I mean, if maybe this should be brought up tomorrow during our priorities
sure.
about directing staff to make this an important item. Because if they're doing inspections in the city limits, it's important for us to know. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Quillisi. Claire Hill.
Good evening to all of you. I'm Claire Hill. I live at 522 Foothill Road in the city. I'm here tonight to support my neighbor Cindy Convery in what seems like an unending effort to repair the rock wall along the front of her home on Foothill Road. I believe she is now in month number 5, and still a pile of rocks sit along the front of the property. Surely you realize that we're talking about an 85-year-old rock wall that exists in its same spot of origin, definitely showing signs of generations of wear and tear, and greatly in need of repair. That's all this homeowner is trying to do. It seems that one of the city's requirements is that Mrs. Convery have a $1 million permanent insurance policy on this wall to protect the city of Ojai from liability. I am assuming that means that should she sell this home, the new owners would have to continue this policy and so on into perpetuity. That'll make a fun house to sell for the realtors. Is there any particular reason why this one particular wall is considered so dangerous? If you drive up and down Foothill Road, you can't miss the fact that every home along there has 2 rocks to 5 rocks high wall along the frontage of its property. Some even have the old original cement and stone stairs right down to the street, which would now, of course, be considered in the public right-of-way. On Foothill, numbers 520, 606, 612, 710, 714, 818, 906, 1000, and 1104 all have rock walls in the public right-of-way. It was stated in the Ventura Star Free Press that these people are getting free use of the public property. And by the way, I'd like to add right now that the city of Ojai is also getting free beautification in their public right-of-way with these lovely walls, hedges, plants, and other things, all painstakingly maintained by the property owner with no charge to the city. There are 28 more homes in Del Oro possibly posing this so-called imminent danger, as well as numerous ones up and down most of the side streets in the older part of Ojai. Not to mention the entire historic Arbolada, where streets are so beautifully lined with small boulders. If this insurance demand does not exist for all of these previous examples, why should it exist for this one wall belonging to Ms. Convery? Last December, Ojai Valley Inn wanted to disassemble a historic landmark Neff Lounge. Your answer to that was okay. This year, a citizen of Ojai is trying to repair and keep a historic rock wall, and now it's not okay. Kind of makes me want to scratch my head and say, go figure. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one question.
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz.
For staff. Have we issued any encroachment permits where we haven't asked for indemnification insurance? And if so, how long ago did we issue them?
None to my, oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
None to my knowledge in the time I've been working with the city. I obviously can't speak to before I started working with the city.
So so the particular requirement that's being complained about, which is the ongoing coverage requirement, is one that was recommended for a encroachment permit on Signal Street. And it was, at the time, the city attorney at the time felt that it was a common practice and the appropriate practice when there's an encroachment permit that stands like that. So this was derived from that. We used that as the template for this.
I guess that what I want to be assured of for the benefit of our citizens is that there's a fundamental fairness to what we're asking for. And I understand that if there are encroachments within the city's right-of-ways in which there's never been an encroachment permit issued, then we can't subject necessarily that. We might be able to code enforce it, but we can't subject those properties to the provisions of what we would require for a permit to be issued. But I would hope, and I would like staff to report back to the council on it, that if we have issued encroachment permits and we haven't required the insurance that we're asking to be required now, that the council really look at whether we want to require this particular applicant to have to provide that insurance before we look at the code and make sure that it makes sense and it's not ambiguous, and it doesn't, when you read it, you don't know exactly what's required. So I think that in all fairness to this particular applicant who brought a matter before us on an appeal, and we approved the encroachment permit, and now she's having problems with some of these provisions of the permit being issued, that we look at it and see if there really is a fundamental fairness here, or whether she's kind of getting the fact that we asked for the insurance on Signal Street, and now we're asking her for the insurance, but we haven't asked other people for it. And that's my concern.
Yeah, Councilmember Haney.
I guess in the same line, my concern, and I think this is, I think we've talked about it before, is in the permitting process on the checklist for an encroachment permit, is there a box that says you will be required to provide a limited amount of insurance for the duration of this ownership of this encroachment right from the city? Is that the proper way of stating it? But I'm just, again, I think that's where, if something like this had been put up front and Cindy was made known of that from the get-go, she might have thought differently on how to approach changing her driveway. Maybe she wouldn't have changed her driveway entrance. There's just a lot of things that I think that we're behind the ball on, that I'm looking for improvement on in the future. But you'd have to answer that if there is something that says what the applicant is going to be required to provide.
And I know this is a public comment.
Yes, it is. I was gonna
topic, so
say.
I want to make sure that we don't get into a debate here. Yes, but Councilmember Clapp.
Well, that was my question. I want to make sure we're not treading into a non-agendized item. Would I be allowed to make one more statement? It is an editorial comment having nothing to do with the wall.
I think with those caveats, you're fine.
Okay. I just think overall in this city that we are an evolutionary city. We're not a grid that was built by KB Homes. And a lot of times we have been applying kind of standards that have been evolved out of those grid-style developments by developers to a city that was evolved out of carriage roads, and I think that this is kind of the problems we're facing all the time, and I think we need to be very careful going forward that we make sure that we keep that in mind whenever we talk about policy.
Michael Shapiro?
So just for clarification, is the council asking that we put something on the agenda or that we provide a written report off agenda?
My request is that we put something on the agenda with regard to the requirements for permits, particularly where there's some sort of identification that's being required of the applicant.
With a particular focus on encroachment permits or any, as opposed to all permits, focusing on
Mostly
encroachment
just
permits?
encroachment permits.
That can certainly be put on the agenda. And that requirement is right now in two different sections of the code, and I think that would be a vehicle to look at whether it makes sense to modify that or not and have a discussion of that.
Okay, well, as you know, I don't sit here as a lawyer, I sit here as a council person, but I did look at the code, and in the one section that talks about identification, it says that the applicant or the person having the permit is going to identify and hold the city harmless. It doesn't say that that identification and holding the city harmless has to be secured by an insurance policy.
That's in
I
the,
think that that's,
the next section after that.
but that has to do, again, I haven't researched it, and I'm not talking as an attorney. It seems to me that the insurance provision of the very next section in the code has to do with insurance that's identifying the city during the construction or the repair, and not the ongoing property and personal injury liability that the city could be subjected to with having an encroachment into its right-of-way.
And I think,
That's the part that
yeah,
concerns me.
and I think that's the provision that we would be discussing.
Okay.
So we'll bring back a report at a future agenda.
And I do want to just note that we do have fences and walls and hedges in our list. And I know this is kind of be a separate item, but this also has to do with neighborhood planning. And we should bring it up tomorrow to see if we could bring some more clarity.
Okay.
Michael Shapiro?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council. Michael Shapiro, Ojai, California. And I'd like to express my deepest disappointment, actually, in you, Rob Clark, our city manager, because just now you repeated something that you did, and you're quoted in the Ventura County Star this past Sunday. You're comparing not apples with apples, you're comparing apples with kumquats. The incident, the one incident where the city has required an indemnification from the public right-of-way to hold the city harmless in perpetuity was a newly constructed block wall covered with stucco that encroached on the public right-of-way where a structure never existed before. Ms. Conbury's rock wall is a rock wall that's been there since 1928. That's still there, like all the others up and down the Arbolada, Foothill Road, and all she wants to do is repair what's there. The differences are very profound, I believe, and I'm glad to hear that perhaps you'll look into this as a council, that these differences should be recognized.
And Mr. Shapiro, I hate to interrupt you, but if you could address the council, that would be greatly appreciated.
Okay. Additionally, I have information that Councilperson Wyrick is one of the individuals who's helped foment the ongoing rock wall controversy by personally lodging a formal complaint against Ms. Conbury, and in doing so, we think you have furthered the city's prosecution of denying Ms. Conbury the ability to abide completely by the current Ojai Municipal Code, and in fact have the right to complete her rock wall. Now, I don't know if it's true, but I'd like to know, Mr. Wyrick, if in fact you did make the formal complaint against Ms. Conbury, because if it's true, your complicity in this matter to allow Ms. Conbury to follow the current Ojai Muni Code to repair and restore her wall has become a scandal and a bad mark in the history of what otherwise I think should be considered good government. And finally, is it also true, Councilperson Wyrick, that together with Building Appeals Board member Bob Daddy, perhaps others, you have either directly or under a shell company become investors in the Ojai Valley News? If you have, and given that Building Appeals Board member Daddy has colleagues and friends, all have a very specific political agenda for the city that many oppose, I consider that if you've not disclosed any financial interest in Ojai's only newspaper, given your position in the city, You have then violated any reasonable and generally accepted code of transparency. And I'd expect the same standard to also apply to Building Appeals Board Bob Daddy, who's, who has also been alleged to be an investor in the Ojai Valley News. So I'd like a response to all of those.
Gladly. Number one, no. No complaint against Mr. Connery. I have asked questions about policy with respect to
Mr.
the
Wyrick, I have an email that has a
Please,
formal, it has your
Mr.
I
formal
did
complaint
not
on it.
file a complaint
Well,
on her.
I will
period.
prove evidence
Made
that's
inquiries
otherwise.
about the overall policies with respect to
Not
indemnification
true.
and insurance.
It's not true.
Yes, sir, it is.
All right, I'll provide the evidence that
Fine,
that's not true.
and I'll show you.
Yeah, and if
Okay.
I could please ask
Number
you,
two,
you guys to let each
on
other
the issue
speak.
of the accusation about investment, emphatically and completely, no.
Even under a shell company,
No.
a fictional company.
No.
Okay, good.
So again, we have personal accusations that aren't true.
No, I asked. I said, we have heard this to be true, and I wanted to know if it was.
They're not.
Good to know, because
Okay.
it would be a violation of
But I do want to
transparency.
state for the record that the owner of this property came before this council, asked for an action by resolution in terms of granting a special encroachment permit over the objections of staff. We granted that encroachment permit. The stipulations were a matter of public record in the resolution granting that encroachment permit, and the recipient of that encroachment permit is now objecting to adhering to the stipulations that she advocated we pass.
Okay.
That is a matter of fact.
It's also a matter of fact that that resolution was given to her upon the beginning of the meeting, and it should have been posted 72 hours in advance. She never had a chance to look at it, didn't agree to it, and it was a violation of the Brown
I
Act in
think
doing
Mr.
so.
Summers might want to speak to that.
And if I may, I'm going to end this dialogue between
I've
both of
finished.
you, and then I'll
Thank you
have
for the
Mr.
time.
Summers.
I appreciate it.
Mr. Summers, would you like to
Answer
respond
that
to the
question.
alleged Brown Act violation?
Through the mayor. And first, I'd like to note for all members of the public, the mayor controls who is given the opportunity to speak, and the mayor controls the flow of the meeting. I'd please ask all members in the room to refrain from speaking unless you've been recognized by the mayor. That prevents this sort of dialogue during public comment. Public comment is an opportunity to speak to the council, provided for by the Brown Act and the First Amendment, but there is a system to be used during that process. And next to speak to the actual question at hand, the Brown Act requires that for a regular meeting, an agenda be posted 72 hours in advance, providing a short description of the items to be considered on the agenda, generally 30 words. There is no requirement in the Brown Act that the full packet, including any draft resolution, be available 72 hours in advance of the meeting. There is, however, a requirement that if something is distributed to the majority of the members of a Brown Act body, in this case the City Council, within 72 hours of a regular meeting, that item be made available for public inspection at the time it is distributed to the council, or if it's distributed at the meeting by the city or by a council member, to be made available immediately, or if distributed by someone else, not city, to be made available, again, available for public inspection after the meeting. That requirement was complied with in the council hearing on this underlying encroachment permit, as the draft resolution presented at the meeting to the council on the dais was available for public inspection that night. Therefore, the Brown Act was complied with in this case. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor.
Councilmember Clapp.
I appreciate the clarification, Mr. Summers. It's something I do want to bring up, though, as a council member. I've been serving for 6.5, almost 7 years, and quite often things are given to us at the last minute. And also, things are quite often given to us by the public at the last minute. And one thing that I would really recommend to the public, when you have something to distribute to the council members, that you do it prior to a meeting, because there's so much that goes on at a meeting, and quite often some of the stuff that you give us is quite lengthy, and we don't have the opportunity to read it. So the farther in advance you can give us stuff, the better. That's greatly appreciated. Regarding the resolution that was handed out to Mrs. Convery and the City Council that was not 72 hours prior, it was given to us the night of the meeting as well. And again, that was a resolution. It was a legal document. And I was not given the opportunity to review it ahead of time. And I think when you're dealing with something, particularly an appeal, I think that it's really important that all council members have the opportunity to sit down in the quiet of their home or wherever, to have time to review a document, to make sure they completely understand it, and ask the city attorney for clarification if there's something they don't understand. When it's handed to us at the last minute and a meeting commences, there's never time for you to really thoroughly digest a document. And I think that leads to potential errors and miscommunications that could cause council to possibly make a decision that they wouldn't make otherwise if they completely understood a document that was given before them. And I think that's what happened in this particular case, and I personally have had it happen in the past with other important matters as well. This is not an assault on staff. I just think that it would be helpful for policy and for the council's benefit if in the future, if there seems to be a need to distribute something at the last minute on a matter that is really quite important, particularly regarding legal documents, that we either table the item rather than see it that night. So that's just a recommendation in general, that it makes for better government if we have the opportunity to review a document as well as the public. Even handing it to the public at the last minute before a meeting doesn't really give them the opportunity to digest it, ask questions, and really come forward with some questions that may feel after they read the document after a meeting and say, well, wait a minute, I have a question about that. Why did you require this? Or why is this happening? Or why is that happening? So it's really not fair to the public either. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. I just want to remind everybody, we are in public comment. And I appreciate all these comments that are being made and this dialogue. I just want to make sure that we bring things back to order. I do not mind if there is direct communication with the public and a certain council member, mayor, staff. I just want to make sure that they're respectful to one another and they let each other respond to whatever questions they have. So I know that there are contentious issues out there. I know there's concern, and it is sometimes does get personal. And I strongly feel that it is important to provide answers, but let's do it respectively. I feel okay with the process. I feel okay with how everything's going. It's just that motions gets in the way, but let's keep moving on. So with that, I'm going to move on with public comment. Is Cindy Convery?
Cindy Convery, Ojai. I'm here tonight about Resolution 1525. Before I start my comments, I just want to say Brown Act page 16 requires that an item, like a resolution, where an action, like a vote, is to be taken by a legislative body like the City Council, page 16, must be noticed to the public no less than 72 hours before the actual meeting and must be properly placed on the agenda. The draft resolution cannot be circulated and considered for the first time just moments before a meeting. A resolution, in order to be ratified, must be voted upon, and in a second meeting, a hearing may be ratified. So, in fact, Resolution 1525 is void. A few hours before my June 9th appeal, Greg Grant actually called me to say that staff was drafting a resolution in my favor. I hadn't even made the appeal yet. How Greg Grant decided that the appeal would go in my favor, I don't know. In any case, I explained to him I didn't have time to review the document before the meeting. When I walked in that night, he handed me, 5 or 6 page legalese document that I told him I did not have time to review. It was a direct violation of the Brown Act, page 16, which I've already referenced. Of everyone here, Councilman Wyrick should have alerted us to this Brown Act violation then and there, since he stated on April 28th that he embraces the Brown Act because it provides for transparency and notice to the public. I direct you all to Brown Act page 16. All items must be noticed to the public 72 hours in advance. I am now within my rights to file a complaint with the district attorney and the attorney general, who I spoke to, not Kamala Harris, but an attorney who works in her office, a family friend, who also told me that this was accurate. Regarding the discriminating terms of the resolution, there is no code requirement here for any citizen to ever insure the city in perpetuity for anything, and no code requirement to conduct a survey of the existing encroachment that's been there for 85 years. I can't appeal a resolution that is a Brown Act violation. It's already void. I can only insist that the City Council put this issue back on the agenda in order to rescind the illegal resolution and then to find a way forward which will allow me to follow the Ojai Municipal Code, which is all I've ever asked to do. I just want to follow the code. make a motion to allow the repair of the rock wall in front of my home under the terms of Ojai Municipal Code Section 7-1.103, permits required for repairs in the public right-of-way. That requires insurance under Ojai Municipal Code Section 7-1.106, insurance. That's what everyone's been held to since Ojai was incorporated in 1921. The insurance code, I believe, was enacted in 1990 or 1975, I can't remember exactly, but somewhere in there. Both Greg Grant and Rob Clark have insisted that I insure the city in perpetuity, which means if I sell my house, a new buyer will have to agree to insure the city. That's a hardship, it's discrimination. Their collective argument is, quote, lots of cities ask for this. I responded, I don't live in other cities. I live in Ojai, and I demand to be allowed to follow the municipal code of the town that I live in, Ojai. 560 people this week signed a petition requesting that I be able to complete the repair under the condition of our city's municipal code. They vote, and they're watching this. Now I want to read you the first section of our municipal code. Section 1-3.01. The provisions of the Ojai Municipal Code are to be construed with a view to affect its objects and to promote justice. It's not to be used as a weapon against the citizens. Why don't we, as a community, follow our code and promote some justice here? I look forward to resolving this legally on the agenda, hopefully during the next City Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Questions? Comments? Bye.
I just want to make sure, since Ms. Convery just spoke, to lay out all the options that she has from on paper, including the Brown Act, page 16 explanation of why we think differently and why she thinks a certain way, just to clarify everything and have it on paper. And I hope that we could look, could you send that to her? Could you send her all those options, and could you send her?
I believe she has already been sent a letter from the city manager that outlined 4 options for her to resolve this matter. 1 specific to her project, 3 that were general options.
Mm-hmm.
1 looking at insurance requirements, 1 looking modifying the code to allow an explicit modification of an encroachment permit, and 3 looking at increasing the appeal time to resolve the fact that the appeal period to appeal her resolution has expired. I believe that letter was sent by the city manager that I had drafted most of the text of. I'm happy to send a further letter advising, giving our formal position on the Brown Act point. I won't do so unless directed to do so by a majority of the council.
Okay. And then, so I don't know if that's the pleasure of the majority of the council, if they would want her to send a memo regarding the Brown Act or not.
And I'll note that, obviously, if we have a formal letter from the DA or the Attorney General, then we will write a formal response to that letter.
Mm-hmm. I just want to make sure that we move on this and we do our part to try to resolve this issue.
Could I please
and-
make a statement about Mr. Summers' comment? I can't appeal a resolution that's void. The 30-day clock that was set on June 9th, I spent 4 weeks going around in circles with Greg Grant. I was in Rob Clark's office on July 15th, past the alleged 30-day appeal notice. I spent an hour in there with Michael Shapiro. Rob Clark never once said anything about a 30-day appeal. He said, well, let's take a look. We'll put this on the agenda. I don't know, somebody on Signal Street had to do this, and we explained that was a new encroachment. This has been there forever. We went around and around. Greg Grant directed me to Rob Clark. It took me 4 weeks to get in there to see him. Rob Clark directed me to the meeting here tonight, and it was meant to put it on the agenda to discuss it, hopefully resolve it. This is when I got a little frustrated, because this has been going on forever, and I finally contacted some attorney friends, because frankly, I don't want to go down that road. I want to be allowed to speak in public. I think the public is very interested to see what's going on here, and I'm discovering some kind of, unsavory behavior, and I don't really like it. And it's Ojai.
So,
the whole
I know.
answer here is
Yeah.
this is Ojai. Let's talk.
Yeah. Mayor Pro Tem Blatz?
Yes, I would be in favor of a agenda item coming back, allowing Ms. Connery to bring the conditions Well, let me ask this. Do we have to make an amendment to our code that allows her to bring something back before us if it's been over 30 days since the approval? Or can the city on its own, can the council on its own motion say to bring it back before us? However, we can't do that if she's going to insist that it's a void resolution. And our position is it's no violation of the Brown Act. And you're not going to get, I don't think, any other opinion from us other than
We can have
it was
a
a
truce.
proper, it was a proper it was a proper action that we took that night. But I would be willing to have it come back before us for a determination by the full council as to the provisions within that resolution.
There is a path to do that. The path would be a new application, which,
Okay.
and the reason for that is that the encroachment permit section of the code does not currently provide for a modification to an existing encroachment permit, and it provides that after the 30-day period from the date of adoption, the decision is final.
Okay.
There's no further opportunity for council to pick it up after that 30-day period. But there's also no provision in the code that prohibits reapplying for a previous permit, the way that there is one in the planning and zoning code.
Okay.
So that would be the path, is it's be a new application. I would expect that Greg Grant would immediately bump it up to council rather than act on it himself, reflecting the existing controversy. And that would provide council the opportunity to consider, as before, whether to permit the wall and also to give detailed consideration to the insurance conditions.
And
And
you,
if-
and you
The
supplied her with those options, correct?
That was one of the
One
options.
of the problems
Hold on,
when I
hold
was in
on,
here
hold on, I'm
before
not
was I
done
was
talking
never
yet.
allowed to
Just-
speak.
just
This
a
couldn't have
minute.
I'm not
happened.
done. Now, would it have to come back before the council for us to waive a fee for the encroachment permit?
That would have to be part of the council's decision, and the council would have the ability to waive that fee if desired.
Okay. Then that's what I would like to have come back before us. Go ahead.
But I do have a question,
Assuming-
follow-up question. But that's an applicant's choice, right?
Yes.
That's not the council's choice.
That is correct.
That's an applicant's choice. Councilmember Clapp?
I have a question about permits. You mentioned that there's a permit, there's an existing encroachment permit?
The permit has been approved for issuance. It has not been issued because the applicant has not complied with the conditions governing its issuance.
That's what we did. We approved.
The council's action approving the resolution approved the issuance of the permit.
You're
But she
talking about the
hasn't pulled-
resolution, but there was not an original permit. I understand.
She has
Okay.
another permit for the driveway, but not for the rock wall itself.
Okay. And this is the resolution that now I have questions about its validity because of what Mrs. Convery said about what she read about the presentation of the encroachment permit. This is really interesting in light of what I've said about these things being given to us at the last minute. That really, because honestly, I didn't have a chance to read that, and I didn't know.
But whose fault is that? We had a motion before us. It was
Whose
seconded.
fault is that? It was
Yeah.
given to us.
We voted on a motion.
the dais.
It's our responsibility
I
to
would
see
see
the
the
Well,
motion.
I'm gonna bring this back to order. I'm gonna say, we're gonna lay out the options. Well, Ms. Convery got the options already in front of her. Let's set up a meeting and let's see if you have anything else to convey.
Yeah, I just have one more
Because,
item,
and we could bring up those options at a different, and we have to agendize the item to talk about if we want to proceed with any of the options that affect Ms. Convery.
Can I
But
ju-
not particularly to her situation, it has to do as a whole. So we could bring that item up September 22nd if the council, desires. But if not, then we have to, it's all on Ms. Convery's side of the court, and then we'll wait for her decision on how she wants to
I
proceed.
would
But-
like it to come back, I agree, but I also would like to have it come back with an explanation about the resolution issue, because it was not my fault that I didn't read it, because it was given to me at the last minute. I did not know, and when I'm not,
we
when I'm given
understand
a
that.
document like
We
that, I
understand
don't
that.
have time to review
Can I
it,
just
and I'm
make-
asked to vote
Just
on
1
it.
minute.
So I want to deal with that issue as
Yeah.
well.
And to state the record, I did know what I was voting on that night, and I fully I wouldn't defer back to getting that item. But one final comment. So are you clear with the options?
I just want to say that part of this whole, we'll call it a miscommunication, is the way this forum is set up. I was never allowed to come back up to the podium to speak again, and I'm having a hard time being allowed to speak now. You know, I got 3 minutes, and I got to spit out all this information, and then I'm told to stop talking. So one of the options that was presented to me by my friend in the Attorney General's office, the simplest one, he thought, would be for the council to make a motion to rescind the resolution, and then to make a motion to allow me to repair the wall under the terms of the Ojai Municipal Code. That, he thought, was the most simple way forward. I'm allowed to repair the wall according to the law, and the resolution is rescinded. Anyway, just something to put on the list.
Well, we'll bring that back up, or unless Mr. Summers
Let's
wants to
look
reply.
into it. You know,
Yeah.
we don't need to
But
debate.
we
the
do want to
legalese
move
right now.
forward, and we do want to make sure that we lay all the options out, and if there's something that this council is willing to do as a majority,
Mm-hmm.
then we'll discuss it with you September 22nd.
Okay.
If not, then we'll proceed from
Thanks
there.
a lot.
Thank you. Mr. Summers, any further comments before I move to our last
Well,
public comment?
I'm not
speaker?
exactly clear on what we've been directed to bring back on the 22nd, so I'd hope someone could restate that for me.
We're bringing back the options that are under our control, not necessarily that has to do with Ms. Conberry's situation in particular, but the approving the extension of the appeal.
I understand what you're
And
talking about.
it's those options that Mr. Summer provided to Ms. Conberry that would have to be council action, not her choice.
Got it.
Does that? Yeah.
And I can also add to that analysis of the Brown Act point, and with respect, I do disagree with her analysis, but I can write it out.
Okay, great, thank you. Is it Mark Ball? Yes.
Compared to all that, this is freaking easy. Mr. Mayor, City Council, thank you for letting me speak tonight. My name is Mark Ball. I've lived in the Ojai Valley for 50 years, and I've resided at 1124 Paseo del Robles for 24 years. I'm here tonight representing all of the residents of Paseo de los Robles. We're a part of the Golden West housing tract, known as the tract behind the bowling alley. I have a letter signed by every resident of Paseo del Robles to City Manager Robert Clark requesting that our cul-de-sac be repaved when the city repaves Golden West Avenue sometime this year. Although the city plans to pave Golden West Street, we've been told by Public Works Director Greg Grant that our cul-de-sac is on the back burner. It makes absolutely no sense to us why you would pave Golden West and not one of the cul-de-sacs that goes off of that street. Paseo de los Robles is one of the most dilapidated streets in the city, as evidenced by the pictures attached to the letters in the package that I gave you. It's full of cracks, potholes, and gaps that get worse every day. If the suspected El Nino occurs, our street will be a gravel road. Paseo de Robles has had zero maintenance in over 20 years. Not only is the dust from the street unhealthy, the poor condition of the street is a liability and negatively affects our property values. We're requesting the City of Ojai prioritize funding and appropriately fund this needed infrastructure repair, and we appreciate your consideration at the earliest opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. And we will be talking about paved streets on item number 4. And then we could bring that item up.
I have a comment.
Councilmember Wyrick?
Really quick, I want to commend you for doing it this way. Pictures, laying it out very clearly, petition. Thank you, because it certainly crystallizes and makes some questions I'm going to have on the agenda item later on, so thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Ball, before you go, on agenda item number 4, I don't know if you've seen anything in the packet or whether you can take a look at this.
I've seen the agenda item, haven't seen the packet.
But it outlines around 15 or 16 roads that have and parking lots that are currently, the Public Works Department is asking us to approve the bid process that's out there, to let the bid for the roads that are on this list, including Golden West from Ojai Avenue to Grand Avenue, along with all kinds of other side streets. But I did have a question, and as long as we brought it up now, on this list are 2 Golden West Avenue, Ojai Avenue to Grand Avenue. And while this is an agenda item, as long as Mr. Ball is here, and I don't think he needs to stay for the entire agenda item, if Mr. Grant could address why we have Golden West on there twice, I would appreciate it. Mr. Grant? It's a typo? Okay.
Entire Gold West from Ojai up to Grand Avenue.
Okay. All right. And then, just so you're aware, when the actual agenda item comes forward, I am going to be questioning Mr. Grant as to how these particular 15 locations were determined, and I'm not sure what is the approximate, we don't, because it's going out to a competitive bid, we're not really saying how much we expect it to be, but you're asking for an additional $50,000 tonight.
So actually, tonight, we're going to recommend that the bid be extended. The bid has been extended, so
Correct.
we're recommending that the award be extended.
Right,
So we
but-
can address those questions.
Right, but we're not necessarily saying how much we expect all this to be.
We have a budget estimate, but yeah, you're right.
Right, because we don't want to let that out when we have competitive bids coming in. But I'm just saying that that's going to be part of the topic that I plan on getting into with Mr. Grant, is how did we pick these 15 locations or so over, for instance, the North Montgomery Street that I live on, it's a mess. I can tell you where Mr. Ball lives, that street is a mess, and there's plenty of other ones in the city. And I just wonder how we're grading those particular streets and how we're prioritizing them to be done. Because I think that's as important as anything else. And when you have a major thoroughfare like Golden West, while that's great, there's certain side streets, like the one Mr. Paul lives on, that affect probably 10 houses, that is even more important to them than the main thoroughfare going through Golden West. So we'll get into that one.
And I would only add that when the city repaved Oriole, which is part of the Golden West tract, all of the cul-de-sacs off of that street were repaved. They didn't leave little side streets. And my worry is that once you leave the area and Golden West is done, great, we're moving on, and that street would never get done. And I'm telling you, it will.
You raise a
if
very
it rains, we'll have a gravel road.
You raise a very legitimate question, and again, I absolutely assure you I'm going to bring up this issue at the agenda item.
I appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
And I don't know if we have an extra copy of the report. I have it electronically in front of me, and I can't print it. But I'd be interested for Mr. Ball to get a copy of those streets that we are going to be discussing under item 4, if you
Or
could,
two.
Rhonda.
Yeah, I'll give
her my copy.
Okay.
You want this here?
All right, well, thank you, Mr.
Here you go, Mark. If you'll take that, you'll see the ones that we're working on.
Any other speakers wanting to speak during public comment? Seeing none, I'll move on. We have a consent calendar. I was asked to pull item 1J, and I want to pull item 1B just for a minor
Yes,
modification.
I had the same thought, thank you.
And anybody else wanting to point any of the consent item? No? I do want to point out, I'm going to start with, or could I take a motion on the rest of the consent calendar?
I'll make a motion to approve consent calendar 1A, C, D, E, F, G, H, and I.
A second.
Roll call?
Clapp?
Yes.
Wyrick?
Yes.
Haney?
Yes.
Blatz?
Yes.
Laura?
Yes. My request for item 1B was that I noted that on the minutes, I voted yes for the leaf blowers. And I had I actually recused myself from the item. So I just want to make it make a correction that I abstained from that motion, and I don't know if that was your...
That was one of them. I wanted to make sure you didn't get into trouble there, Mayor. But I had another clarification I want to make absolutely sure about, since I was the one that made the motion. The motion was, as I made it, was to add to Mr. Grant's conditions, not at the exclusion of. I want to make it very clear, and in other words, it says it was moved by Councilmember Wyrick, seconded to amend the municipal code to include. These inclusions were in addition to what Mr. Grant had in his recommendation, as I recall. And I'm wondering whether we ought to say to include, in addition to Mr. Grant's recommendations, the following stipulations. Because that was part of it, and in particular, Mr. Grant in his recommendation had operational standards, like not blowing in the street and those kinds of things, in his recommendation, and I included that in my motion too. So I'd like to add the bullet at the bottom, operational standards, to the correction of the minutes, if that's acceptable to everyone.
I agree. So with that, I'll take a motion for those two modifications on 1B.
Can I make that motion?
Yes.
I'll make that motion that we approve item 1B, the minutes of the City Council regular meeting and special meeting of July 28th as amended.
I'll second.
Roll call.
Clapp. Yes. Wyrick.
Aye.
Haney.
Yes.
Blatz.
Yes.
Laura.
Yes. And then item 1J, Community Development Department Staffing, I was asked by Councilmember Wyrick.
Yes. I thought that we ought to have a discussion of this because I've already shared some questions with Mr. Clark about this. We have had this request for adding an associate planner position to the Community Development Department budget is following a period of great turnover since I took office, since Councilman Haney took office. There's been a large turnover in terms of contract planners. We, I believe, had an associate planner part-time, I believe, that was resigned, if I'm not mistaken, early on. And so I just want to make sure, from the standpoint of what we approve and what is going on in terms of this Community Development Department, that we understand what is going on in terms of this turnover. What are the contributing elements? Are we really addressing all those contributing elements? And also, one of the issues I have is in terms of staff reports, because I have personally seen, and I'm referring to the graph on page 1-81, the dramatic increase in staff reports in 2015. I have personally seen where that number of staff report is partially inflated by the very fact that we're having turnover. In other words, when we have a contract planner that leaves or is asked to leave and a new one comes in, they do a new staff report after the previous staff person already completed one. I've seen as many as 3 personally on the same project, as many as 3 staff reports associated directly with turnover. So I just really want to understand, I just thought I'd bring up the issue of how we are handling the contract planners, how we're handling the entire issue of doing staff reports in the Community Development Department.
Could you, is that a question for staff, Councilmember Wyrick?
I'm welcome comments by the city manager, actually. And it's not a surprise to him. He knows
Right, yeah,
that I was.
Bill and I have discussed this.
Yeah.
So I would say, even though there may be some redundant reports, that's really the exception, and that the increase in the amount of work that we have is a true increase. When we first noticed this, our strategy was to bring on contract planners. And the reason for that strategy is that in community development work, there's a lot of cycling. In other words, there's waves of activity that come and go. And when you have contract planners, you can staff up to meet the peaks and then you don't have to continue to pay the fee to meet the valleys. The actual experience that we've had is that it's been very difficult. There's a lack of contract planners out there to hire. So we've had difficulty finding contract planners. Some of those that we have found have not really been able to perform at the level that we expect, and that's really the main source of the turnover. This recommendation, in my mind, is really just recommending that we cast a broader net. We're not going to stop looking for contract planners, but we'd also like to seek applications from people who'd like a full-time job as an assistant planner with the city. And we're thinking that there may be a pool of people out there that are qualified that we're missing because they're not in the contract planning field. They're people that are working full-time, maybe for another agency that would like to move or would like to move up or whatever. So we would not fill this position unless we found someone who was very well qualified. But I think it increases our chance of getting the staffing level that we need. Also, I would say that I'm less concerned about the cyclical nature. I think there's a true increase in the amount both of private sector work as well as council-directed work. And that's an ongoing situation, and at least some level. So we have about $180,000 budgeted for contract planners. An assistant planner would cost less than $100,000. So there would still be, even with an assistant planner, the availability of money to hire contract planners to deal with peaks that occur.
Do you know how much of that $180,000 we're using for contract planners right now?
That's the amount that is budgeted for contract planners.
It is, but are we using that
we
full
are
amount?
not. We are not.
Okay, that was my question, if we're
Yeah.
using that whole 183.
Not right now. We're not fully staffed.
Okay.
I've had the same conversation with Rob regarding the staffing. We were in a recession, and so I understand the necessity of micromanaging that budget and really looking at staffing levels and making sure that we were meeting the needs of the community. But we've come out of that, and we're actually growing right now, and we're growing physically in the permit process, and we're also growing physically in the needs that the new council is putting on you. So I personally see the need for a full-time planner. I also still see the need for additional part-time staffing. So I think the way you're going at it with a full-timer and still leaving budgeted funds to pick up part-time if you need it is going to benefit us. So I think what you're doing is sound management.
Any other comments, questions? I do have a question on page 1-80. The last sentence you have on there states, "Our needs may change as a result of the upcoming RFP for building services if the contract includes clerical support for all these functions." Could you elaborate on that?
I'll turn on the mic while I do it too.
Yeah.
So in addition, when all this activity increases, our need for clerical support increases. And when we add the part-time building code enforcer as we have, that increases the need for clerical services. So we debated whether we should also recommend adding a full-time clerical position. However, we felt that we should wait until we see the results of the building services RFP, because some of the burden of the clerical side of the building function could be carried by the private contractor.
Okay. Councilmember Wyrick?
You mentioned a minimum of 4 months to fill this position. Where do we stand in terms of bridging from now into that minimum of 4 months in terms of existing contract planner resources?
We do have one person that potentially will come on and carry some of the load part-time, and we're still seeking others, but we haven't found them yet. The two firms that we have been working with cannot supply anyone else. We've also talked to another firm, and they haven't got anybody else. And then there's Ringcon out there that we chose not to work with in the past. So and I don't think it's just Ojai. My understanding is that it's also other communities. There just isn't a lot of folks out there in this business right now.
I've heard the same things from other city officials, others elective. If nobody has any further question or comments, I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll move we approve item 1J, I believe, right? Yeah.
Second?
Roll call.
Clapp.
Yes.
Wyrick.
Aye.
Haney.
Yes.
Blatz.
Yes.
Laura.
Yes. Now we're going to be, Councilmember Clapp, did you have any further comments you wanted to make before?
No, I think that
it was
things have been
MMA.
addressed.
Okay, thank you. Now we're going to be moving into discussion items, Cultural Resource Ad Hoc Committee report. This is receive an oral report from the Ad Hoc Committee, which I'm part of. I'm going to start the comments on this committee, and then I will ask Councilmember Haney to add his comments, and then I would invite anybody from the tribal group to add further comments if they may. I have to apologize in advance. I wanted to write a report about our first meeting, but there's been a lot on the table. I couldn't, but I did make notes on that day. And I thought that the first meeting was productive. There's still some issues that we have to talk about to bring to the council. That particular meeting we addressed the protocol on how to consult with the tribal group in terms of discretionary projects, the timeline, the time frame. And I thought that we were going to advise them or consult with them before the completed applications. And they had a meeting subsequential to that meeting to dive into the finer details. So that was productive. The issues that we still need to address are how to consult with the tribe with ministerial projects that have to do with earth disturbing work, and also discretionary projects that are exempt from CEQA, and other ones that we need to consult with the tribe, how we're going to develop that protocol. And along those lines, we also talked about what's the correct way of adding, I guess, meat on that bone, the teeth, and whether it be through a resolution or have it be through an urgency ordinance. We're still trying to weigh the pros and the cons, and before actually developing any of those documents, we'll bring it up to council to see what direction council wants to take. But we're still trying to do some staffing investigation, some different levels of permitting process. We're going to have a report from staff, from Ms. Wold, before making those recommendations. And we're just laying out the options right now. We're going to meet September 8th and talk about what staff came up with. I feel like I'm missing something else that staff was going to do before that meeting and present to the ad hoc committee, but I don't have it.
I think what we were going to do is we have some consultations that are occurring in the meantime, and we were going to come back and report on the outcome of those consultations as sort of a test run to see how things are going.
So overall, I thought it was a pretty productive meeting. I thought we made some headway in creating a relationship with the tribe and our staff. We still have a lot of work to do. We're not fooling ourselves, but I think it was the first meeting that there's a lot of potential on creating some type of relationship with them and staff. Any further comments, Councilmember Haney?
I did a lot of the work on the goal setting of the ad hoc committee, and I think we went around the room. I think there was 10 of us, and I think the consensus at the end of the day was how we enhance cultural / tribal communication and consultation within the city regarding the complete permitting process, And then the second thing was how to do it cost effectively. If I remember correctly, I think, Rob, you said that was a good point to make. The other thing is that we have to make everyone aware of is AB 52 and the consequences of that new state law and how it's going to affect all the cities and counties and any municipal governments in the state of California. It's going to change the way cities do business with their local tribes. So not only will we deal with permitting and those policies, but we're going to have to look at our general plan and how our general plan is written and how we follow it as a community. And two, I think the second thing that I came away with was how we communicate that to the citizens of Ojai, so that we're all contributing to this new way of looking at cultural resources. And it's not necessarily a new way, it's just a way that we have to look at them. So that's going to come out of this ad hoc committee. And I think one of the things that we did talk about was trying to make a statement of the purpose of the ad hoc committee, so that we could post that in the next to the building and safety window, as well as provide it to the Ventura County Star, but more importantly, the local newspaper, because we want to dispel any rumors that we're doing something that we haven't done, because we have been aware of our cultural resources. I just don't know if we've always followed our general plan in implementing how we protect them and how we acknowledge them. So I think that's important that we do that, and that we also let the community know this is not anything that we're going to do in the dark. That as issues come up and as we formulate ways to resolve them, that we're going to bring in all of the players. And I said this to the Planning Commission the other night. All the players are homeowners, general contractors, civil servants. The whole community is going to be a part of this, so that when we move forward together. And that's the goal of the ad hoc committee.
Any further comments from our tribal group? Ms. Tumamayat?
Yes, good evening, staff, council members, community. It was a very productive meeting. I'm glad that we've come a long way, right away with making this final decision of doing this committee. And again, the transparency of what we're doing. We're not here as a tribal group to do your job. We're here to help you, to facilitate, to answer questions, to help explain guidelines, the rules and regulations of what it is to protect cultural resources. And more importantly, we're here to lend our story, to lend our experiences, to lend information that isn't out there in the records. So, we've been in this journey of cooperation with the city council and with the community too. I know there's probably a lot of concerns, and I'm a little surprised we're not getting any phone calls from people. I don't know if they're scared. It's like, oh, I don't know if I should support this or not. But we know we have the support of the community when it comes to what we do as tribal people in a way of education and in the programs we do at Ojai Day. This is just another one. This is not one we've been vocal about. We've never gone out to the community and said, you need to help us protect this. So it's kind of new, and I think it's a little surprising to some people. Some people say, well, why are they doing this now? We've always done this. A lot of times, as I said, a lot of our work is outside the valley, and we're in many different areas of our territory. So, to come back and to refocus in our own homeland here, in our own town that we grew up in, and work with city council and planning and the office, our committee for historic preservation, I think all three, every Parks and Recreation, Public Works, it is a unit. And I think that having this committee is going to help us all with the clarity of what we need to do in rules that have been in place for many years. And for some people who haven't followed those rules over time are going, oh, we've not really been in compliance, have we? It's like, no, you haven't. So, it's we're here again in the spirit of cooperation to be able to just be part of this. And I'm hoping that the community will see that, as what it is just one of education and dialogue and explanation. So I thank you for that. We've stepped over that line now into another phase, and it looks really promising. And I thank you all very much for that, for this opportunity to do that.
Thank you.
Any questions from council? No? Any comments? No. Yeah, Councilmember Wyrick?
Julie, I just want to say one comment and one suggestion, and I'll see what the rest of the council feels about it. I came across a tribute to your father from 1992 in the LA Times.
That's when he
I
passed.
distributed it to some of you. It really moved me because it talked about his life and how he came to his position, how he was the Grand Marshal for one of our 4th of July parades, I believe, the year that he passed. And I just, to say, I just want to kind of put in all these years, a tribute to his memory, and a lot of what we're doing now I can see is directly related to the kind of almost awakening that he went through after he completed his normal career path.
Absolutely,
with Shell. And
absolutely.
It was very, very inspiring to read about him.
Thank you. And his guidance is still with us. And there were few people in that era, his generation, that had the courage to come out. And really I'm learning.
Okay.
I'm learning my culture. I'm hearing some things for the very, very first time at the age of 62 as he retired. There were things that we took, as living, as, we're in our ad hoc committee talking about. They weren't talked about as preserving or protecting in his father's generation. It's just living and doing.
Right.
But then going back and learning about the culture, and he loved the storytelling. He loved the children here in the valley, and everywhere he went, he just had a re-essence and gain of pride
Yes.
in the culture. And he was nearly full blood.
Right,
Which a
and that
lot
really
of people
came through.
didn't know. We come from a very distinct, directly descendants from.
Right,
from
and that came through. And another
culture.
comment in that tribute to him was your last name.
Yep.
They said your last name is one of the few directly
The only.
traceable, the only one in the Ojai Valley still extant.
Is the only Indian native name that's being used as a surname throughout the entire native community of
Yes.
the Chumash people.
That was really,
Yes.
really
That was our
impressive.
great-grandfather,
Not just
Juan de
impressive,
Jesus.
it's just
Thank you.
meaningful to me to read
Yeah,
that.
well, that's what keeps us strong. I mean, that's what keeps us vigilant, and in some cases, digging our heels in more to educate people about who we are as people, how long we've actually been in this North America, and how rich, with the curriculum that are in the schools today, the laws that have been put into place. Some people ask, well, what gives you the right? Several different state agencies have given us this right, so we're just, we're participating in it, so,
I just want to make see how it, it's received by the rest of the council. I want to reiterate a suggestion I made before.
yeah.
And that is that I really think that it would be appropriate for us to engage you and an archaeologist who you work closely with to do what amounts to I don't know, you might call it a training presentation or something along those lines to maybe even to the Planning Commission, other people could sit in. I think it would help answer a lot of questions. And there is a training budget in the Planning Commission, and I want to throw that suggestion out again.
And I think it's a fabulous suggestion in terms of alerting and educating ourselves on the importance of this subject.
And we have
So,
talked about
yeah.
doing a presentation at the beginning of the city council meeting too, so we can work on something like that. Like, maybe a 15-minute presentation. It doesn't have to be long,
Right.
10 minutes somewhere. Just a really brief overview, but then do something more extensive
Yeah.
in workshops and stuff, so people
Well, thank you.
can
Thank
really-
you,
And you can
Julie.
always come to Ojai Day. It's coming up. I'll remind you guys. Come to
And
our little
I
village.
absolutely appreciate your participation. That's our update. If
thank you.
no one has any comments, then I'm going to.
I just wanted to add one last thing. Julie, thank you. Julie and I have talked closely a couple times, and every time every time she talks to me, I'm amazed at how much history you have and how much lack of history I have. It's
Well-
I've only been here 20 years. I don't know.
Yeah,
I don't know anything. And every time you speak to me about your family and about your history, I just grow and learn. And then having said that, I just, ultimately I have a goal or an agenda. Some people say, what's your agenda? And mine is to see how we actually place someone on Historical Preservation Commission that has a tribal background, whether it's an archaeologist, whether it's a Native American, whether it's someone who just has a ton of knowledge regarding all aspects of Native cultural resources. But that's my agenda, is how to figure that out, how to get someone so that we have a set of eyes and a set of ears looking at this issue on a monthly or daily or as an as-needed basis. That's one of my goals.
I was asked, but it was a seat that was for city residents only, and I'm county. So next opening may be for the county then. So, but anyway, I was honored to be asked. It's just, whoops, sorry, it's city only. But I do appreciate it, and I am so willing to give up, and give more time voluntarily to do these things. I do it a lot. I just asked to be involved in SAG, who Joseph was here giving his presentation. We're having a meeting. So wherever I can do to just keep, educating people and, I'm just
Glad
we're
to
here,
hear
so
that.
thank you.
Really. And just to again, doing a quick overview, we still need to talk about marketing/public outreach, second, implementation options that we'll bring before the council, and then thirdly, we'll be trying to adjust or find the appropriate policy for consultation with the tribe. So those are our three goals, and we'll be meeting September 8th, and hopefully if we can at that meeting come up with options, we'll try to get it on the agenda as soon as possible for the council to decide. Councilmember Wyrick?
I want to make absolutely sure that we're clear. And I think we all have this understanding, but I think we should say it for the record. When we initially entered into this phase, we did it under a 30-day trial period. I think we need to make sure that the council is concurring with extending that 30-day trial period, perhaps to a future date certain, maybe another 30 days. But I think since we did a finite period for a trial, if it looks like it's going to take another 30 days, that we formally say we're going to extend that trial for another 30 days on the notification directive.
And that's a great point. We'll be adding some dates and some timelines.
I think we need to do that tonight.
Yeah.
Can we do that tonight? Do we have to make a motion to extend that 30-day period?
Mr. Summers?
It wasn't agendized as consideration of a particular action item, but I think it could be done as a statement of the
Direction.
Yeah, it could be direction to staff, because fundamentally it's a staff-driven notification process. I think that could be done as a direction to staff to continue what it's been doing.
I would just make a motion to continue a 30-day direction to staff for the notification.
Right, I would second that.
Okay. Do we need to take a roll call, or all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Pat. Thank you, Don. And I don't see anyone else here, but I'm going to move on to item number 3. The designation of voting delegates and alternates for League of California Cities Annual Conference, and I'll turn it over to Rhonda for a report.
This year, the League's 2015 Annual Conference is scheduled for September 30th through October 2nd in San Jose. An important part of the annual conference is the annual business meeting, scheduled for noon on Friday, October 2nd. At this meeting, the League membership considers and takes action on resolutions that establish League policy. In order to vote at this meeting, the City Council must designate a voting delegate. Your city may also appoint up to 2 alternate voting delegates. I'm not aware of who's attending, but I do need to notify them who the voting member will be, so they'll have information available.
Okay. And I know, as I'm aware that Councilmember Haney and myself are attending. I don't know if other council members are attending. No? I think Mayor Pro Tem Blatz was the delegate last year, right? So, I mean, if you want to be the voting delegate, I'm absolutely.
You have it, I'm just, I'm going to learn.
So
and
could we
to-
do-
and to support you, so.
Could I be then the voting delegate, and then the alternate would be Councilmember Haney?
Do we need a motion?
Yes, I think
All
we
in
do.
favor of that?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed?
Thank you.
Fourth item, 2015 Road Rehabilitation Project, PW 2015-01, and I'll be turning it over to Mr. Grant to give us the report.
Sure.
Or
Well,
Mr.
while he's
Clark.
coming up, I just wanted to tell you a story. When I was city manager of Avalon, there was this field that we coveted and really wanted for recreation purposes. And for years and years, we struggled to try and get a hold of it. And finally, after a very long effort, we got a hold of that field, and it was called the Field of Dreams. and about 6 months after we put it into public use, we had a packed hearing at the city council because there was a fight between the soccer players and the football players as to who got to use it. And, I said, well, thank God at least we have something to fight over. So it seems like that's kind of happening with the roads. It's been a huge struggle for this community to get the funding that's necessary to pave roads. And paving $1 million worth of roads last year and then coming up with another $1 million this year and close to that the following year is just a landmark accomplishment. And it came at it took a long time, and we had to sacrifice a lot to get there. But it's kind of interesting that now the fight is over who gets that road paved.
That's a good one.
Thank you. Mr. Grant?
Good evening, Mayor, members of council. I think a memo had gone out to the council that we did decide and recommended and went ahead and delayed the bid opening. We had a limited pool of bidders that it appeared were going to actually come through on the bids. And there were several that made it obvious to them, made it obvious to us if they had an extra week or two, they would submit bids on it. So we thought it was best for the cities to receive at least, I think with a larger pool, with its extension, we'll probably see 5 bidders. And I think without it, we probably would have seen only 2 bidders. It was not ideal. It happened to be a very busy week for other bids. We had a pretty tight time schedule as well as our bid getting out as well. So that was a recommendation to extend it to the next meeting. And so we'll present those bids at that time. And then I think I believe there were some questions. Do you want me to discuss how the streets are prioritized, how we
Yeah,
choose them?
if you could answer prior questions, that
Okay.
would be great.
Sure. And, when I got here, there was a typical for most cities to have a pavement management system in place. Had not been kept here at the city for some, over 10 years or so. I think it was back during the period of the recession when they cut back on all kinds of cost, and they didn't keep that. So last year, we worked with the County of Ventura. They've got a pretty large road section and specialist over there, and we contracted for them to go through and do the detailed footwork inspections in the streets out there to come up with a pavement management system. It's the system requires a lot of our input as well, but it's primarily having an inspector go out and look at every one of the streets and grade them for 6 or 7 different factors, everything from raveling and surface cracking and structural failures and all kinds of pavement conditions. So they aggregate all of those together and they come up with a pavement condition index for each street. And so you'll hear a lot of cities brag or be ashamed about their pavement condition index average. So I think we're kind of in the 55 out of 100. I think you'll find cities that are a little wealthier in the county. For instance, Thousand Oaks, I would guess they're probably up in the mid-70s or so with their pavement condition index. So with our 55, you'll have quite a few streets that are way down in the 20s or so. Those streets are bordering on full structural failure. You're getting to the point where you've got to do a complete removal of the street, and obviously very expensive to do that. If we can catch them before they go too far, we can still do an overlay, and that's what we've been working with. These new rubberized asphalts are terrific. They're much more flexible than the old conventional asphalt. So if you do 1.5 inches, you'll see us try to work with the 1.5 inches over the existing pavement. They always grind the edges to try to match the gutters and so on. But Caltrans has moved to a new approach where they're doing what they did on 33. They grind 1.25 inches, the full width of the street, and put this very minor rubberized asphalt layer overlay on it. But when you grind it, you get rid of a lot of the old junk that was there, a lot of the UV deteriorated asphalt that was on the surface. You pull a lot of the old coal patch that was up there. You create a very rough surface for that rubberized asphalt to bind into. So we've been trying that fairly successfully. We tried it last year. But some of the streets are further gone. We have to do a deeper grind, about a 2-inch. And that's obviously more expensive. It's all generally paid by the ton. But it's some of these streets are reaching that point where we haven't quite got there. We can catch them. So anyways, we come up with this pavement condition index in all the streets. And then, so we rank the streets by a few categories. We start off with arterial collector streets. So those are obviously the more heavily used streets that the feds approve as streets that are your primary collector arterial streets that can be used for federal funding. And we receive this cyclical funding for overlays every few years. So we try to reserve those streets for the federal funding when it comes up periodically. That looks like there's a cycle coming up next year that will, I think City Manager Clark has worked with the other city managers to allocate, I think 150,000, isn't that? Or I think we got 200, that's right, 200 out of that. And we just spent one a couple of years ago as well. And so those are kind of reserved arterial collectors for this federal funding. And most of our arterial collectors are in pretty good shape because of that funding. The next step you go down to is higher volume through streets, and so those would be a high priority. And we take those streets and rank them by the pavement condition index. So anything that's down in the 35 PCI index or lower is starting to really move towards full failure, and that would be on our hot list for those streets to get paved. And we still have quite a backlog of those streets. I think the rate we're going through them in the next 2 years, I think we'll be through most of the through streets with the higher volumes that we can bring up our PCI index up into the mid-40s or so it's kind of reasonable. And then the next level down would be short streets that are connectors, but they're not dead ends and they're not heavily traveled streets. You just think of a lot of Oak Street, for instance, that connects Drown to Montgomery and streets like that. They connect, but they don't have heavy traffic on them. So that's on a secondary category. I guess first to be arterial collectors, second would be through streets, and then these connector streets. And then last would be a cul-de-sac. So I think the individual who's just up here, the resident that mentioned he lives on Paseo del Robles, is a good example. Unfortunately, those streets have always been low on the priority list. So I just looked on the Google Maps when he was talking, and there's 9 homes that have driveways on that dead end, and it's about a 500-foot long street. So unfortunately, it ends up being on low priority. There's just not that much travel we're getting on that street. So our goal is to get to those streets, and we're working with a consultant right now on some of the new, they call them micro-surfacing approaches, where you kind of use a slurry mix in combination with a grind on the surface to do it at much less cost than these overlays that we're doing right now. But we're still, I think because of this backlog of the recession, we're still are on a program to get to dead-end streets that are on the lowest end of the priority. So they're roughly out in the 8 to 10 year zone before we'll touch those. I see there's a question. I'll be glad to take that.
I have a question.
Council, are you done answering your?
Well, I think that I was trying to just say that is the prioritization of the streets using the pavement condition index in combination with essentially the volumes of the streets. And unfortunately, the dead ends are at the low end of the scale.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Wyrick?
A quick question, and then don't cut me off because I have an immediate follow-up, okay? Is Del Prado Court as bad as Paseo del Robles?
Unfortunately, I don't have those PCI indexes off the cuff.
Okay.
I don't know.
I mean, that's the one next to it.
Right, and I think those two are in generally the same condition.
They're both terrible.
I think they haven't been touched, I'm sure, in 20-plus years.
Okay, here's my follow-up suggestion, okay? We are going to be delaying this bid anyway, right?
Yes.
Okay. Have we ever used, well, comment and then why I'm getting there, my suggestion. It seems to me that there's some and I apologize, it's how I'm trained, scale economies to doing something next to something you're doing already. In other words, the unit cost of adding the cul-de-sac is going to be to the existing Golden West project using whatever technique you think is appropriate, like maybe the micro approach, is going to be less on a standalone, period. There's going to be, it's going to be less because you're already staged.
Right.
Okay? Oil prices are tanking. We're talking about asphalt. We might get pleasantly surprised in the bid. We don't know. Okay? We're delaying to try to be more competitive. Rather than speculate, why not do a bid alternate to add these two, either one at a time, these cul-de-sacs, to the bid? Then we're not speculating. It can come back to us, and at the time that the bids come in with those two bid alternates, we could then decide with real numbers in place whether we want to service the situation that's obviously pretty bad for these homeowners.
Can I respond to that?
Yes.
And I think it's a good point. When you remobilize equipment, it absolutely is an additional cost.
Right.
And that's why when I think there was a couple streets right over there in Golden West last year, and we did, what was the street? I think we did Oriole Street.
Mhm.
And this year we plan to do Martindale. When there's a short extension attached, it doesn't seem reasonable to leave that short extension.
Right.
So there's a certain point, you've actually got the equipment staged, you've
It's
got
already
the
there.
grinder rolling down the street.
Right.
But also, there's a certain point when these dead ends add up enough, and the dead end that Mr. Ball mentioned tonight is just one of many dead ends we get.
Well, we're only
complaints about on a
talking
regular basis.
two that are on this particular project right now.
And, all right, so the other,
And they're kind of orphaned if you don't do them. And I'm not saying we make the decision tonight, but why not structure the bid to include these options, and then we find out what they're pricing them at?
and there is an ability to flex these bids by 25%. The contractor
What
would be
about a
more than glad.
specific, what's your price for adding this cul-de-sac in the bid?
And I think we already know, because these bids have a price per square foot, so we can add square foot to it when we want.
Well, you said there was all I'm saying is that I think if we structured it where we could make a decision when the bid comes in with that alternate, that would be a good idea.
And I'm trying to say that it is structured that way right now. We can add 25%.
Well, then
until that bid comes in.
include that as in the overall with the ability to take out. Whatever the most cost-effective way it is to get the competitive quote for taking advantage of those scale economies rather than orphaning these things, it's going to require a real expensive restaging if we ever do take care of them.
And so, and we're set to go on that, and in addressing your point about the oil prices, I kept thinking this is one heck of a good time. And I just
Exactly.
keep hearing from all of the asphalt companies that they were not reducing the prices, and it's a
we'll
substantial
see.
part of the price, but we'll see the
Any other
competitive bidding.
questions?
No, that's my
Okay.
suggestion. That
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz?
Mr. Mayor, I agree with Councilman Wyrick. I'm just confused about your answer. It seems as though with these two cul-de-sacs, if we're not going to get to them for 10 years, and we're repaving Golden West, these are going to be left alone for many, many years to come. And as long as we're doing it, it seems like that neighborhood we could be done with for a while if we did those two cul-de-sacs. Now, you're right, there's plenty of other cul-de-sacs in the city, but we're not necessarily doing a main road next to those cul-de-sacs this go-around. And I'm confused when you say you've taken it into consideration already with the 25%, or you would have said, we always have the option to do those two cul-de-sacs with the bid that we're putting out now. Your comment was, we're not going to get to them for 10 years or more. So I'm confused with your answer, and I'm with Councilman Ryrick. Why don't we just ask for them to bid on those two cul-de-sacs so we can see what the real value of that is?
So, I'm sorry if I confused you on that. I'm just was trying to state that any time the primary bid item can be flexed by 25% up or down without having a change in the unit price for that. So we can always add additional square footage up to 25% or reduce it if we wanted to. I think you'll find that our estimates are fairly aggressive. So when we estimated the $1.05 million for this job, I sure hope it comes in at that point. I think what we're going to find out is we have to trim work off of this job, if anything. The cost for The ADA ramps that are required now are very expensive. They'll approach 20% of the entire job, a couple $100,000. And so I think we already have this pretty well pegged. And so the idea of adding streets could certainly be done if they really are low, if those prices for oil come in at outstandingly low prices and we see it come in. But I still think that what I'm saying is at 1.05 million, we'll be lucky to see the bids come into what we have budgeted.
I understand, but I'm still confused of why not building the option into the bid.
It's in the bid right now. It's the option is there. We can add 25% square footage the day after this bid's awarded. And we can pick any streets we want in the city. Sorry?
Or the day it is awarded.
The day
We could come back with an analysis of adding those two streets when we bring the bids back.
Right.
Councilmember Clapp, did you have any questions?
Yeah, real briefly. There's two streets here, Matilaha and Drown. Matilaha has quite a few stop signs on it. It's a long street, but quite a few stop signs. Drown has one stop sign, and I know for the last 15 to 20 years, there's been trouble with speeding through on Drown Avenue, including at one point a traffic study was done on that street, and they found that there was an average of 45 miles per hour down that street. Right now the street is really in bad condition, which inherently slows people down. My concern is if you pave this stretch of road, which is the first road that cuts through to Grand Avenue after Montgomery, that it's going to exacerbate that speeding problem. Is there any plan to deal with the problem with, when you do deal with cut-through streets, to not have it actually increase the speeds that we're already seeing on these streets?
I think we looked at Drown specifically for that reason. And Drown is an ideal complete street. It's a relatively narrow street compared to most of the city streets. I think it's about a 32-foot wide street, the edge of pavement to pavement. So when you have that kind of street, it's a little bit narrow than the new complete streets demonstration we did out at Fulton Street, the new extension. So there's quite a few cars parked on that street, which is ideal. You have 7 or 8 feet taken on each side, and that leaves what they kind of call a yield street in the center. It's kind of difficult to pass each other. Everybody slows down for each other on those. So it's ideal. You could do additional measures we looked at, for instance, putting curb extensions or tree pockets out into the street. But the other side is that there's so many cars parking on that street that would take up valuable parking space.
Yeah, I think it's true that it's narrow and people do park on that street, but the reality is during the traffic study, even with the cars parked on that street, people were going 45 miles an hour. And it's just a concern that I'd like to express, because I want to see streets paved, but I also want to see our streets become safer. And I don't know the solution. It's just a problem, and I just wanted to bring it up, and I don't have an answer.
Councilmember Haney?
Wait, Ms.
Well, I was actually going to go back to the earlier question about adding the cul-de-sacs. So what Greg is saying is that we're going to get a unit price. And with that unit price, we can calculate exactly how much it would cost to add those two cul-de-sacs, if the council wants to do that. Based on the
But he said a different technique would be used on a low-traffic area.
We were considering that is not in the bid right now, right? We'd have to actually add, and I'd like to even, I'm sorry, go back and address that the priority streets we have is really what our inclination would be, to add those priority streets and keep moving down the list instead of jumping down to what are considered low priority streets. I know they're because the contractor, it is true that they have to remobilize to a certain degree to move across the street to, we might cross town to find that street we have. But fortunately, the way the bid process is, they aren't able to regain that without, as long as you stay within that 25%, they still have to stay in the same price per square foot. So we would tend to pick our next priority street and move to that street instead of moving down to a very low priority street.
My take on this, Greg, is having an option of an additional quote for an additional street, is if you come into budget, you can come back to council and say, to do that street, it's an additional amount of money. This is our quote. This is what it's going to take. What you're saying is, and I'm hearing you, is it's a square foot no matter what. Mm-hmm. And we can calculate what that additional cost is going to be without it being a line item bid. That's what I'm hearing. Either way wins. you can come back to us at the end of the bidding process and say, we can do that street or we can't do that street. Or if you want to do that street, it's going to cost you this much more. So having said that, one of the things that I didn't hear in your criteria for choosing streets is when the street was done last. You know, for instance, if we're going to go through and do Golden West, when was the last time Golden West was done versus the last time the Bold cul-de-sac was done? And I think that I didn't hear that if that's part of the criteria in your choosing streets. Because if we're just choosing streets that are main thoroughfares, all of these side streets are always going to be neglected. Sooner or later, we've got to say, we did you 5 years ago, we're not doing you for 20 years, we're going to do A, B, C, and D. That's all.
And just to address that, it's mostly the pavement condition index which addresses that. The streets that are paved and have low traffic indexes, mostly it's trash trucks that really wear them out. They'll last a long time with that overlay. The thoroughfare streets that are paved will not last as long. The traffic volume that repetitively beats up that street is going to tear it up faster.
And then I just want
that PCA index, you keep going through it every few years, and you'll see things, what needs to be paved, what's the priority.
And then I wanted to touch on Betsy's concern. I drive down that Drown Street. I don't know how anyone can go 45. I mean, I am scared to death to go over 30 miles on that portion of Drown. I don't know how anyone can go 45.
For full disclosure, I live on that street. Believe me.
And I've heard
it happens.
I've heard other people bring to my attention that a lot of people speed on that road. A lot of
It's something,
people.
we've had people that
People that
have
live in
cars
that
parked
street,
on
yeah.
that street, had their rear view mirrors ripped off. I've heard accidents, people smashing into cars on that street. I know, it's amazing. It's amazing.
I want to.
Rhonda lives on that street, isn't it true, Rhonda? They haul butt, don't they?
I do want to bring us back to the streets, and I do have a couple questions. I mean, I find fascinating the questions about bidding process and what you could add 25%. I could go either way on it. I see Councilmember Wyrick's and Mayor Pro Tem Blatt's point of view, but I still think that we could do it under your current process. I do want to add one street or an extra. It's already on here, but it's going up to, I think it's on Grand Avenue. It is the one between Mountain View and Pleasant. I've seen a lot of students and parents going up that stretch of the road, and there's a lot of bumps on that particular road that I think are safety hazards because they go through that back side of Topa Topa, and there's a huge, I don't know if if it would be too expensive to fix because it seems like there's roots from the trees that are pushing up the pavement. So I don't know if that's in that's in the index.
I'm sorry, what street was that?
Yeah, it was I think it was Grand Avenue.
Oh, Grand View?
Or Grand View.
I see.
Yes, between Mountain View and I think it's Pleasant.
Oh, the upper section.
Yeah, the upper section. It's that I see that a lot of people use that road.
I think right now we're doing the heavier section that takes people up to Topa Topa, which is the heavy routing.
So it would just, to bring it to your attention, I don't know where it is in the index. I mean, because I see that there's going to be a lot of lobbying for certain roads to be, but I see a lot of parents using that section of that road.
I think you understand where you're getting at how the priorities are set, because there's a lot of people traveling up those streets to Topa Topa School and so on, and they need to be repaired or they're going to deteriorate quickly into a point where you have to fully rebuild them at a much higher expense.
And
so
then
dead-end streets, they'll take a long time to keep fading down.
And I guess what I heard you saying on the cul-de-sac is that you're already planning to add this overlay, the slurry overlay.
We're looking at that, but it's still it's several years down in the program.
Oh, so
before
it's
we catch
not
up
so
with
it's,
these streets that have deferred maintenance.
That's not budgeted this year, then.
No.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
then,
I could jump in here because I'm still not satisfied because your comment about the unit price, that's using the system you're using on arterials, and there may be a much less expensive approach to use on a non-arterial. So I think you're kind of skirting the issue here. If we may, it's our job to make decisions. The pavement index is a tool for making decisions. Well, we're making a decision here. And it seems to me that if your approach is going to overstate the cost of taking care of these orphaned cul-de-sacs over what it might be if you specify a lower cost technique and that's appropriate to a low traffic cul-de-sac as opposed to arterial. And I just don't understand the resistance to adding the option on a traffic appropriate technique that may be much less than the unit cost for arterials.
So the rationale that we are following at this point for the pavement management system is to take the streets that are severely deteriorated with reasonable volumes on them and bring them up to par. It's going to take a few years to do that. And then take the dead-end streets that are very low volume, I'm talking 9 to 15 homes possibly on a street, and then use this lower cost approach to really knock out a lot of the dead-end streets, these low-volume streets. But it wouldn't happen for years. You could take a portion of it.
All I'm saying is we certainly, if the majority wants to see what the cost of putting in that approach to these two where you're already staged, why not?
So we could pay the consultant and come up with an additional specification, additional line items for it right now. I would estimate $7,000 of estimated cost for the consultant, add it as bid items, and then I think still we're really pushing our cost, and then we could consider incrementally, even on an annual basis, doing 20% of it.
I'm not committing, I'm not saying we necessarily do it. I'm saying let's have a fair quote for what it is to serve these people's needs. And I'm, like I say, we can't be a slave to a technique. That's a decision tool, but it's not the only consideration. And all I'm saying is we shouldn't especially be a slave to a technique that ends up raising our overall unit costs on a life cycle basis.
And I should like to point out, too, that if we follow this technique and we get to these dead-end streets in a few years, we can do that technique as the major technique for the year. If we do a very small bit of it right now, if we just do a couple dead-end streets, it's a special slurry, special equipment, and it's not necessarily cost-effective.
That was going to be my question. The guy that's going to come in and do these major roads has a different set of equipment than the guy that would be coming in doing a slurry.
Yeah, and I think
so
that...
to add it on, you're saying that it's not, it's cost prohibitive to add on the major repair that's going to be done with this particular work order, and it would have a whole nother set of equipment coming in to do the slurry. So the scale of economy becomes moot at that point, does it not?
Thank you, yes. And I think Councilman Haney was witness to that, too, over a Montana Circle, Montana Drive. The county separates all of their contractors by the microsurfacing technique versus the overlay technique. So one technique requires a grind and an overlay, a more typical overlay approach. The other one takes a microsurfacing, and there's companies that specialize in that. So you're better to bulk those together. We could bulk it with this, the county's trying this technique, and they've got some specialists that are doing it. But
I just want to have the choice put before us, one way or the other.
And I think that would be council decision whether to direct the Public Works
To put the choice before
to put
us.
a choice before us. I understand the rationale that Mr. Grant has explained to us.
Right.
I think your question is towards us.
Put the choice before us.
And
So,
whether
Can I add one thing to this too, please? Greg, what's the square foot price right now? What's the ballpark on that?
Well, we typically bid it by the ton, and we go by about $115 a ton.
Okay, and a ton covers how many square feet?
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, trying to think, last year we did about 6,000 tons, and we covered a mile and a plus, so sorry I don't have a square footage
I'm pretty
price.
good at math, but I'm not that good.
I know, the new consultant likes to go square footage, we're going there with this one, yeah.
So my question is, you said to go back to this company First of all, we have to go to an engineer for $6,000 or $7,000 for them to write the
Off the
specifications.
cuff, I'd guess it, yeah.
So these specifications aren't known for this other type of system?
He's got
We
it.
can't- We can't just grab a piece of paper from someone?
He's going to want to go out and look at that street and say, hey, there's structural repairs here and there and there. This is that overlay going to work? Is it effective? He's need to stand behind his work, so he's not going to just throw the spec at us.
Okay.
And
Mr.
can you,
Mayor.
Mr. Clark, and then I'll go to
Yeah,
Councilmember
I actually
Clapp.
had a question for Greg, which is, do we have time to develop the spec and put it into the bid without delaying the bids further?
September 10th is the bid opening, so it's tight, but if we wanted to get the consultant on it and come up with this extra detail, extra quantities, and extra spec, we could do something like that. But I'd like to just remind us, like Councilman Haney saw, it's a specialized company that was over there doing this technique that we're talking about. So we could get it, but we're going to talk about very limited. We're talking maybe 1,000 linear foot of roadway, 1,000. So it's going to, and I'm sorry, I was just remembering, I have about $1.50 per square foot would be the price. So if we did a massive amount of the microsurfacing, we might see prices down below, almost half that price, approaching half the price. But for a small amount, specialized outfit to come in, I wouldn't recommend it.
Councilmember Clapp?
You said that the budget could conceivably be really tight as it is. So we would have to add on, we would have to decide as a council if all these other bids came in, and you already mentioned that there's a possibility we may have to cut back. So if they came in more, there wouldn't be the money allotted to do this surfacing anyway. At this point, I understand that we're focusing on the major streets with a major amount of traffic. I also empathize that we've got a horrible street problem from deferred maintenance, and it's going to take time to resolve the whole situation, but we need to be smart about it, and I'm comfortable with your proposals. So I don't know if we move to proceed with this. Do we have to move to make a motion to proceed with this?
We do have to open public comment.
Public
There are
comment?
people out, so
Okay.
this,
Okay.
I do want the public's input if they have any comments or
Yes.
questions.
If I could
or-
make,
I'm
if I
comfortable
could
with
throw
that.
one more closing comment just to address Councilman Warwick's point, and that is that some cities do take, generally when they're in better shape, when their PCI comes up, because you want to keep these streets out of total failure zone. And you'll see these dead-end streets, because there's so little traffic, they don't tend to fail. They just tend to have fully raveled surface, right, where the surface is in bad shape. But really, you don't see structural failures very often, so they can actually be ground and overlaid. Maybe not, we'd have to look at each one individually, whether you could do the microsurfacing on them. But what I was saying is that some cities do a technique where you take 25% of your total budget and you allocate it to low priority streets, microsurfacing and other techniques like that. And it's a way to kind of keep moving those up, so there is some attention paid to these low volume, low use streets.
all I'm asking is that when this bid comes before us, we know what that price would be. That's all I'm asking. There's absolutely no need to be making a decision tonight other than directing staff to allow us to make that choice when the bids come in. That's all I'm asking.
Mr.
Mayor Pro
I
Tem
guess
Watts.
that if the bid comes in at a square footage, I guess, or does it come in as a lump sum bid?
It's, there's a grand total, of course, but it's individualized items, square footage, quantities by the price per unit.
Okay. I guess the issue I have is that we've identified all these streets, and while I can appreciate the streets have been identified, and if they are truly in a total failure situation, that to preserve whatever is there so they don't have to be totally replaced, I can understand doing those. But I also know that the complaints I get about the streets are streets in front of people's houses, not thoroughfares. And there's hardly a week that goes by where people aren't calling me saying, when the hell are you going to pave my street in front of my house? And those two streets over off of Golden West, when we're doing the Golden West track with the main thoroughfare going through, it just makes sense to try to do those two cul-de-sacs that probably haven't been done in 20 or 25 years while we're doing it. That's all. That just seems sensible to me. And I don't know why we can't somehow, within the bid process, without spending $7,000, get that information. Or we get a bid in on a square foot and we say, okay, we're going to do those two roads, and we're not going to do, we're not going to do this little road over here.
They may come in and scream.
Well, I don't know who's going to scream on that, but, I mean, who's going to scream on Matilla may need to be done. But I get people that are complaining on the little streets, the streets that are cul-de-sacs, the streets that are dead ends. That's where I get the complaints. And I don't get the complaints on thoroughfares.
I understand. So we can certainly, I guess, one point, when you go up Golden West, there's a lot of side streets there too, so I don't know, I guess because this person was in, we could make that a priority, that's one option. And then pick those, and I think there's a lot of other ones that we've all received calls on. I know the city managers received many calls also on many dead-end streets, so have I.
Just let us make the choice when the bids come in, that's it.
Yep, all right, so we can add it, I guess we'll authorize roughly $7,000 pulled from the budget we have to extend. I just estimated that. I think you authorized the consultant money.
Is that the consensus, the majority of the council?
No.
To authorize an additional
$7,000 to ask a consultant to ask how much it's going to cost to slurry a road when we're not even going to slurry. Are you saying that you want them to go in and do a full spend the money for a, what would you call the type of process it's being done?
Microsurfacing or?
Microsurfacing as opposed to whatever it is. I mean, that seems to me, that is a waste of money. I just think that if we.
I would almost suggest we get a quote from a microsurfacing contractor or two on the side.
Absolutely, have it be a separate issue.
And maybe why don't we look at that, and I'll get them independently and just say, if you came in
Yes.
separately, I'll talk to a few of the contractors bidding on this and say, do you ever do microsurfacing yourself? Do you have good relationships with other ones? What do you think you could bid it to?
I think that's a much better way to approach it, because quite honestly, nobody's going to be happy. Nobody's going to be happy. Every time we come up with this list, somebody's going to come in and say, what about my street? And we really have to be careful about that. And not that I don't have great empathy. My street's a mess too. But I think that might be the better way to approach it, rather than
So you can bring that information to us.
that, to me, I think that makes more sense.
If it looks like it's effective, I'll have that as an option, but I just want to warn you, I think we're extremely tight on the budgeting. I wouldn't expect us to have any spare money here.
I understand, but if I'm bidding on this, if I was a company bidding on this, and I see that those two little things that are there, because I'm there anyway, I might want to discount adding those two in there and try to get the contract.
That would be great.
Okay.
I mean, that's just the bidding process.
If it looks reasonable, I'll be glad to have the specifications modified, and I guess we could even send a memo to the council
just
about
see.
this situation.
Councilmember Haney?
Greg, just one last question on, let's say there's 4 methodologies on street repair. You know, a complete removal, some type of an overlay, some type of a slurry, and some type of this micro new way. When you're putting this together, is there any way that you can have all of those assessed in the initial evaluation, so that if this does arise, you already have the information available, you've already been educated on it? It seems like, you know, I believe you're a very competent man, that with that knowledge, you should be able to go out to the street and say, this is going to take this type of thing. I don't need a $7,000 engineer's report. I know what it's going to take, and you know what I'm saying? So we have this already covered up front versus, well, we're only going to do this, so I'm only going to write the specs to this. It just seems like if there's 4 methods, we should have those methods on hand, and not just for this year, but for future years also. The technology in this business doesn't change overnight. You know, it's a gradual change.
Absolutely.
So
Okay, and I think we do know those prices essentially. We know simple slurries are down the 20, 40 cents range, and microsurfacing gets up towards $1. This work that we're doing is about 50. Last year, we looked at the alternatives. We looked at a 1.25 inch full width mill and fill. They call it, grind the entire street and fill it with 1.25 inch. The newer Caltrans approach versus the more typical past approach was 1.5 inch overlay with an edge grind to match the gutter. So we had alternatives last year. We compared the two, and the 1.25 inch was a touch less expensive, so we're trying that out. But so I think maybe it is an option to discuss pavement management systems and so on if we want to start allocating a chunk of money every year. It basically does address those low volume streets, but it does reduce the upkeep on the higher volume streets, which is where we'll end up spending a lot of money eventually.
I do have one more question. I'm going to turn it to the public and see if they have any comments. Could you clarify, because on the third recommendation, it says the bid results exceed the budget, adopts staff's recommendation for reduction in the scope of work or a budget adjustment to match the award with the budget allocation. Could you clarify what staff's recommendation for reduction in the scope of work?
The intention of that recommendation was we were planning to open the bids on this past Friday, and we would not have enough time to actually know for the presentation before when the administrative report went out whether or not we were over budget or under. So the intention was to, if we were over budget, the bids came in too high, we'd actually trim back work to make budget. Or the second option shown there would be we could actually pull other capital improvement items off of the CIP, the capital improvement plan, and allocate them to keep this schedule streets to be paved. So actually adjust the budget up or down.
Okay, so will you let the council know, or are you going to decide on that?
When the bid opening occurs, we'll take a look if we're within budget, and we'll make a recommendation at that time.
Okay, that would just clarify. Okay, anybody from the public wanting to speak on this issue? Mr. Quillisi, thank you for bearing with us.
Thank you for waking up.
Just me now. Okay, Steve Quillisi, West Eucalyptus Street in the city. I think one of the things that Councilman Wyrick is trying to get to is what's the difference in cost between one technique and another? It's hard. I presume the bid, I haven't seen the bid, or the bid package, but you've got a list of streets and it says street X from A to B and street Y from C to D and stuff like that. And so you get, for each of those segments, you get a certain number of square feet that has to be done, I presume. And then you can total that up and you got 3 million square feet or whatever the number is. I guess in this case about 600,000 square feet if you're talking about $1 million. But it depends on what techniques you use to do each part of that 600,000 square feet of street. And it's going to be very difficult for the contractors to bid if they don't know how much of technique A and how much of technique B you want in that 600,000 square feet or whatever the total number is. And so it's, if you say, I've got this list and that's 600,000, and then I've got these two little streets over here that total 20,000. That 20,000 of a different technique is probably going to be fairly expensive. It's not going to be as if you use that technique on 300,000 of the 600,000 square feet. So it's not as easy as we would like to have it. I'm speaking from the point of view of building aerospace stuff, but I think paving streets with different techniques is probably pretty similar in terms of the business model. Yeah, we should, however, I think, set aside some portion of each year's allocation for street maintenance to these 20 or 25-year-old orphans, because they will soon become 40-year-old orphans if we always work from the top of the list down. So something's got to be done to help the bottom of the list. Thank you.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Mayor,
Yeah.
if I could just make another comment. You know, it very well may be that because these bids are ready to go out and we've kind of identified a certain type of surface that we're going to be doing this year, that it's difficult to change whatever we're going to do this year. But sometimes, as far as our community is concerned, it may be the quantity of the streets that we can do and the streets that have been neglected, and take on only those main thoroughfares which are really in a deteriorated state, but start concentrating on some of the cul-de-sacs and the shore and the ones that are going to be neglected for another 10 or 12 years. Because I will tell you, as far as our citizens are concerned, the more streets we can pave, and the more streets we can pave in front of people's houses, the happier they're going to be. And it may be that next year we want to say we're going to use this, micro technique or whatever it is at a less cost, and we are going to identify streets that we're going to do, and we're going to do as many streets as we can. Not the longest streets, not the ones that are thoroughfares necessarily unless they have to be done, but we identify a quantity of streets. Because I think that when people hear, oh, well, your street's in terrible condition, but, we may get to it in 10 or 15 years, that's unacceptable. And I agree, we've neglected this for a long time. But in another 10 or 15 years, when you add it to 20, you're looking at 35 years since those cul-de-sacs have been done. And I think for the benefit of our citizens, I think a year we need to focus on those kinds of streets and maybe those kinds of streets only, and let the other streets go for the next year, rather than their streets.
Councilmember Clapp.
Yeah, I agree. I think that might be a way to approach it. Say a certain percentage, or maybe even a certain percentage go to slurry, and another percentage go to ones that are extremely poor condition, that are high volume streets too. Do a combination, because I think it's true that, and also, if you defer those short streets another 10 years, you aren't going to be able to get away with just a slurry. Then it's going to be more expensive, just like deferred maintenance in a home, instead of maintaining, all of a sudden you're in a situation where you're in a tear-down situation. So I think that's a really good idea. Then our next budget cycle, we divvy it up into a certain percentage, one with slurry and a certain percentage with major.
Yeah, and as much as I would like to consider those two cul-de-sacs, because we're doing Golden West, I'm not so sure we're gonna save anything by doing it if it's a whole different technique.
Let's find out.
Well, I think we have to then do the specifications for it.
So I was just going to say, I feel so much more comfortable with that approach than trying to change the bid that we're doing right now. We're at the last step of a process that's been going on for, how long have you been working on this? 9 months? So I think part of the resistance is it's just really hard to change direction at this point, right before we're about to open the bids.
Yeah.
But having said that, having a philosophical discussion about how we approach this before we start preparing the next bid makes a ton of sense.
Right.
That's a much better approach in my mind.
And Mr. Mayor, as much as I would like to be able to tell these people that live on those two cul-de-sacs that we're going to do it based on this bid, I think that if they have to wait another year, anybody can live with that. Waiting another 10 or 15 years is unacceptable. And I think at this late in the process, we're just kind of muddying the waters to think otherwise.
Mr. Mayor, and I'm just really glad that he brought it to our attention, so that we've had this discussion, so that we can start addressing it in a way that solves kind of the problem in a better way.
Councilmember Haney.
I just want to attach to that there's a methodology to Greg's madness. And I think there's a little bit of, that's why there's some resistance, but I don't think as a person he's resistant to the changes that we're asking for.
No, I agree.
Yeah, so.
I agree.
With that, then I'll entertain a motion.
I'll move to adopt resolution.
Are we continuing this?
The item is being continued as opposed to adopted tonight because we haven't yet opened the bids. In other words, the resolution should only be adopted once we've opened the bid and are thus ready to adopt
I
the contract.
apologize. Okay, got it.
But I think it'd be, if you wanted to go with the approach that Councilmember Blatz outlined, I think that you don't need a formal action
Just direction.
tonight for this year. It would be direction to staff, do that for next year.
Yep, that's fine.
And if Councilmember Wyrick wanted to proceed with his approach, that would take a motion to ask staff to change the bid.
I'm not making one.
Okay. With that, then we'll table it to September 22nd meeting. Next item is report on the code compliance activity status report. I'll turn it over to staff.
Thank you. While Ms. Wold's coming up, I think part of what we're looking for here is feedback from the council and the community as to whether we're focusing on the right areas and whether we're doing what you had envisioned in terms of code enforcement.
Good evening. Before you tonight is just a activity status report for the code compliance activities. We have a little bit of narrative regarding, the new code compliance inspector, the 30 hours he's spending per week, and how he's spending that. And in addition, we have a matrix here that talks about the types of code cases that he's seeing out there and that have turned into code compliance issues. And we have in that, I should say that we have cases, closed cases remaining open, and a comparison between 2015 and 2014. And then also we have provided you additional information on the web page that, as you know, the city of Ojai just launched a new web page. We'd like to point out that we have made the code compliance complaint form so that you can complete it online and submit it via email back to the city, so it kind of is a little bit more expedited and streamlined. And also, we'd like to point out the additional administrative support that's needed to also booster the code compliance activities, preparing letters, responding to phone calls, answering questions, maintaining files and logs. With all this increase in cases, there's also an increase in support staff needed. And with that, I'm open to any questions you may have regarding the status report.
Any questions from council member? Councilmember Wyrick?
Sorry.
We're just gonna make it it's a habit now.
Try to be really quick.
Just like-
On the leaf blower complaints, what's our timetable for implementing the council direction in terms of an ordinance proposal?
So the first step is the CEQA study. So we have to do a CEQA analysis. So we're going to propose a closed session to discuss that at the next meeting, and then propose awarding it at the following meeting. And the amount of time that it takes to go through the CEQA process will govern how quickly we can do the ordinance.
So that's going to be closed session tomorrow night?
No, a closed session September 22nd, and an award on the first meeting in October.
And so what would be the pleasure of council? I think we need to give direction on enforcing the current ordinance, which is, I guess these complaints are bans on gas-powered, which is our only ban?
Right, their enforcement. I think they're, just so that you understand that our code compliance officer has not issued citations. These are
I understand.
Warnings.
Okay.
Yes, but yes, they are.
So you don't need any really direction from us on that?
Well, we're not issuing citations at this point. We're issuing just warnings about what the code currently says and how you can be compliant with it. That's where we are.
Everybody okay with that? Yeah. Okay, which is a ban on gas blowers, period.
In residential areas,
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Residential areas, okay.
Well, Kathleen, do you want to address the fact that, we talked about this in planning, we don't have a code enforcement officer right now, per se, because he's off on ID. So that came up, I brought that up in planning.
Yes, you did.
Wondering how we were going to supplement that.
So what the city manager and I have spoken about this, and I've talked to Steve McClary, and he's going back to the list for us to look at the people that we interviewed when we hired Vince. And there's an ability, as we've talked about, to hire somebody additional as a part-time temporary worker. So we're looking at those options right now. And we don't really know how long Vince will be out. And, we're kind of restricted from talking about medical issues and leave and that type of thing.
No one's asking about that.
Well, again, I wasn't concerned about why he was off. It was more importantly is how are we going to perform this job if we don't have someone in his place. So I was wondering
Yeah, we're
how-
working on that right now.
Yeah, I was wondering how you were gonna, we're limited in our resources, and I've just always wondered,
Yeah.
when one arm goes down,
Yeah, it's pretty difficult.
yeah, so,
Yeah.
that was my concern the other night of planning. It wasn't to talk about someone injured,
No, I just always
yeah.
try to be careful about it. You know, it's just one of those things. But yeah, we're looking into it, and we're looking into all the options, and it also is included in your RFP tonight as a separate element to providing code enforcement compliance inspectors. So, you know, we were always putting feelers out in many avenues in order to provide adequate staffing.
I had two more
Mayor
comments,
Pro
but
Tem
go ahead. I have
Yeah,
two more after that.
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Where are we with the leaf blower ordinance?
That's what I just, yeah, that's what I asked.
So before we can present a leaf blower ordinance to the city council for introduction, we have to do a CEQA study. And we're in the process of soliciting proposals to do that study. There's some issues that we'd like to talk to the council in closed session about before you award that. And so we're planning on having a closed session at the September 22nd meeting to talk about that, and then an award of the CEQA contract at the first meeting in October. But how long it takes to bring the ordinance is really governed by how long it takes to do the CEQA study.
Right, but didn't we vote on preparing the ordinance?
Yes.
Okay. So this is just part of the preparation of the ordinance that needs to receive a CEQA.
Yeah, so we will prepare the ordinance, and then we will do the CEQA analysis of that ordinance.
So my question is, why are we enforcing our current ordinance when we have an ordinance we've already voted on that's substantially different?
That's really a policy call. If you'd prefer that we not, we could back off.
Well, I think that the new ordinance, you know, we really geared around noise and not the type of blower it was. And if I don't know why we're wasting I hate to see our code enforcement officer wasting time with almost one of the largest enforcement issues. In fact, it's probably about the fourth or fifth on the list, on something that really we're in the process of changing.
Yeah,
and we're not even issuing a citation. It seems kind of silly. Well, what if they comply and they go out and get an electric blower, and then 4 months from now we tell them they can have their gas blower?
Well, I do think most of these cases came before you had that vote. Having said that,
okay.
I think your point's very well taken. So if the council agrees, we will not enforce the existing ordinance pending the adoption of the new one.
I would move for that. Yeah. But it's a discussion item, and we haven't heard from the public yet. But
Any other comments, Mayor Pro Tem Blatz?
I have two. I am very happy to see the number of cases for hedge height, because I think that that's definitely something that we should be concentrating on. I do a lot of walking on the streets, and the hedges are really out of control, and it really does distract from the properties. And then the vehicles in the setback, I mean, that's an important one too. Every once in a while you'll see all kinds of vehicles parked in the front yard and things like that. And that's probably the largest of everything we have. And that's hard to believe, that we have the largest code enforcement item are people parking their vehicles in the setback. So those two items I'm very happy to see that we're doing some enforcement on. And then, of course, the abandoned and vacant substandard properties.
I'm going to go to Councilmember Wyrick, now I'll go to Councilmember Haney.
Is that all right?
Yeah.
Okay. Further comment on the hedges. We did pass a direction for safety first, which is basically the 25-foot triangle, visibility triangle. So I assume, is any further clarification needed on that direction that we gave that was implemented by the protocol from Mr. Clark?
What we've been doing is using as a priority list is the intersections identified by the Complete Streets Committee. And that's
Okay.
kind of how we've been working them. We're going through that list have already been identified before we go off into other.
Is that
new-
necessarily consistent with what's most dangerous?
That was
Our direction was the safety issues first.
Yeah, that was my understanding, that the Complete Street had already identified those that were considered to be the most unsafe. That
How
was my
long ago was that,
I don't know.
that survey was done?
I don't know. You'd have to ask. Maybe Greg might know, Mr. Grant might know.
Well,
but
as
I
long
don't know.
no further clarification on our direction on that.
Well, I'm only offering that as a point of clarification to you, that that's how we're working. If that's not what you wanted us to do, then yes, further clarification.
Well, I'm just saying it
would
was a
be-
protocol from the city manager. It didn't mention the complete streets list. It just meant, it was the issue of danger,
Okay. Well,
traffic hazards.
I'll clarify that to staff, and that it's, that.
I'm just asking,
Mhm.
I'm just trying to
Yeah.
make, if you need further direction, we should give it. And then the last thing I want to talk about is trees.
Okay.
The tree ordinance, you mentioned other designated mature trees, okay? But I also understand we've engaged in kind of a shift of emphasis to include just mature trees, not just designated mature trees. In terms of, that's what I saw at the last planning commission meeting. Those weren't designated mature trees, the palms, they were mature trees.
I'm not sure that I'm not sure.
Well, you were
that-
exercising your discretion to put a mitigation fee on a permit for a removal of a mature tree,
Mhm.
which was a undesirable species.
Correct.
Okay. And I'm wondering if there might be some council direction we want to give whether it's really appropriate for the discretion to be used to have a mitigation fee for a tree that's undesirable, trees that are on the undesirable list.
Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, that is a question for council, but I did want to make sure that I do this right because Councilmember
Yeah,
Haney has
I
to
just-
speak.
I saw that.
Well, that's okay. That's fine.
Is it okay, Council?
go ahead.
Councilmember Clark?
Betsy, you're talking to what?
I was just
Talking
wondering
about-
if the tree issues are what Councilman Ryrick just mentioned, or about pruning without a permit.
Most of these that are here, the tree issues are pruning or removal without a permit.
It includes removal. Right.
Councilmember Haney?
Well, I'll talk to that, but I guess the first thing I wanted to know is, Rob, on the CEQA study for the blowers, I don't remember this taking place on the original blower ordinance, that there was a CEQA study performed. So I was just wondering, if we didn't do it then, why are we doing it now, or who called for it now?
Well, it's a project as defined by state law under CEQA. I think when we were looking, we didn't change the ordinance before, but we were looking at,
Yeah, we changed the ordinance, the one that we're changing now, was written when we had gas blowers. And it was 93 or 94.
Oh. 98.
And, yeah,
97.
and I just, because I remember speaking at that council meeting. In fact, it was one of the first times I ever spoke. But I was just wondering that was never brought up then. And it
Oh, I
wasn't a
don't
part
know.
of studying to change. I was just wondering how it was brought up this time.
It was brought up this time when Kathy and I both looked at this and said, Ms. Wolder and I both looked at this and said, this is an ordinance, that's a project under CEQA, what are we doing? That's a project under CEQA that requires CEQA compliance. What are we doing about it? And then looked at, okay, well, what are our options, which will be discussed at the next council meeting. But I can't speak to what was done when this was adopted in '97. I will note that when the council was considering late last year a complete ban on leaf blowers entirely, Ms. Wold prepared a draft, I believe, negative declaration for that.
Mm-hmm.
And here the options are looking at a negative deck or a mitigated neg deck.
So what I'm hearing is we've already done this.
That was for a complete ban,
Okay.
which has no impacts as opposed to allowing gas blowers when they're not currently existing, which has some impacts yet to be analyzed.
Okay. I just want to know how that came up. That, and then getting back to this, to the
Tree.
The tree issue is, again, I questioned it too, that we had an undesirable, I didn't say anything then, because I didn't think it was appropriate, but an undesirable species,
Mhm.
which some people would classify as a weed.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the question was, we were putting a fee on, and that's what William was talking to, we're putting a fee on top of someone removing something that's undesirable. And I guess I would have questioned that too. I don't know why
That's why
we
we,
did.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Is that how we're supporting our, Betsy, what, you're a part of it, the street tree planting?
Oh, neighborhood?
Yeah, are we supporting replanting of trees in the community based on these mitigation fees that we're trying to collect?
Sometimes that does, if a person cannot replant on their own property sufficient trees to equal the value of the trees that they're taking down, yes, sometimes they pay an in lieu fee. But I get back to the trees with the palms, that was the whole reason that staff elevated that to Planning Commission, because we saw that as being kind of contradictory, and that's why we felt that it should go before Planning Commission and look at the mitigation. We'll also say that on your agenda planning guide, I think Mr. Clark is working on making changes to the tree ordinance. And we have reached out to the tree committee to get their expertise, to make sure that we're working with them prior to bringing it forward, any changes that they see. And of course, there's a coordination because there are some people who sit on Complete Streets who also sit on the tree committee, and there's Complete Streets, and the forest management plan has already looked at some of these. And so by working with the committees, we hope that we're making all of our documents internally consistent. We hope is what we're trying to do.
Councilmember, are you done, Councilmember?
Yeah.
Councilmember Clapp?
That's a really good point, because Mexican fan palms are an invasive, and they've been removed from the creek, from San Antonio Creek, because they are indeed an invasive. So the idea of having somebody have to pay to mitigate the removal of an invasive. Right. So clearly, in our review of the master tree plan, we have to make sure that we identify invasive species, and probably state that there's no requirement for a mitigation when removal of an invasive species.
That's how it was brought forward. Unfortunately, the applicant that night volunteered to provide mitigation, but certainly we had brought it forward with the understanding that the Planning Commission could use the information that it was invasive and harmful to then remove the requirement for mitigation. But since the applicant volunteered, it just went through with mitigation.
Gotcha.
If I could add one more point to this discussion, sorry to jump in. 2 points, actually. One is that it was exactly the point I was going to note, is that the applicant in this case, and the mitigation that they chose to do is to plant more trees, as I remember correctly, non-invasive trees. The other point is that this discussion brought up an element of the ordinance that I think needs to be modified at a future agenda item, which is to explicitly call out invasive species as not protected trees, even when they meet the definition of a mature tree, which at the moment is defined solely by size. Is it a tree, and is it sufficiently big? With no accounting for Mexican fan palms and any other tree species that might be invasive.
Absolutely, that's a refinement that needs to be made. And I do have one further question, because the tree modification was going back to staff. I know that you're overburdened, but do you have any idea, Mr. Clark, when that would be coming back before us? Sometime within the next 20 years.
Definitely within the next 20 years.
Poor guy.
I'm shooting for October.
Okay.
So
we'll be talking about this at tomorrow's priority.
Right.
About ordinances. I feel we're getting out of topic right now because we're identifying ordinances according to code enforcement, how we regulate that. I did want to, before I'll go to Councilmember Wyrick, then to Councilmember Haney, but before that, I do want to make you aware.
No, he can put it, go ahead.
Aware that we are reaching the 10:30 mark, so we will be tabling the last item on requesting for proposal, building inspection, plan check, and code enforcement service. So I just want to let the public know that we'll be tabling that item to next council meeting. And also, if we need to just take a a recess to go and approve the consent calendar for the Ojai Redevelopment Successor Agency before the 10:30 mark. Or if we could finish this and then go.
The Ojai Redevelopment Agency Successor Agency Board meeting doesn't have to meet the 10:30 mark.
Okay.
Because
So
it's
I
a
will.
separate body from the
Okay.
council.
Great, so if the public was here for the item number 6, I apologize, or I could have you make your comments on that item, then we'll turn back to this, to item 5. Or you have comments on item 5? Okay, well then, if you want to make your comments now?
No, go, please.
Go.
You're a citizen, you're more important we are.
Well, I voted for a bunch of you, so I think of you as more important. Steve Quillisi, West Eucalyptus Street in the city. I'm looking at the table that spans pages 5-1 and 5-2, and in particular at the very bottom of 5-1, abandoned, vacant, substandard condition, says 25 cases this year and 14 last year. Since this is vacant, abandoned, whatever buildings is a topic that the Building Appeals Board is working on right now, and I've had some correspondence with Mr. Clark on it, I'm a little confused by this set of numbers. I received, and I think probably all of you did if you followed the email thread, a table from Mr. Clark that had 43 entries on it, 34 different addresses. Now, I don't know how you count cases versus addresses versus entries in that other table, but that table went back to 2010, and it only had 34 different addresses on it. And now I'm seeing 39 different cases just last year and this year. So I'd like to understand what those other cases were that I evidently didn't hear about in the previous correspondence with Mr. Clark. And I'm not looking for an instant answer, but I'm saying now I'm confused because the numbers don't seem to match. Maybe there's an augmented version of that table that I previously received, and I think all of you received, that reflects these 39 cases plus those from 2010 through 2013, which the previous table purported to show, but only had 34 addresses on. So I'd just like to understand where that mismatch is, and if there's more data that I need to be looking at as a member of the Building Appeals Board at council direction to address that topic.
So I don't know the answer off the top of my head. We'll have to go back to Mr. Stewart and see what's been rolled up in this number, and I'll be glad to do that.
Good question, Mr. Quillisi. Thank you. We'll get back to you, too. And I'll turn it back to council. I'll go to Councilmember Wyrick.
I just wanted to reiterate that the application of a mitigation fee, as my reading of the code, is utterly and completely discretionary. It is not mandated. It is discretionary. And I just think that we should not have a shift in how we handle mitigation fees without some sort of council input, in my opinion. And if we're having a shift, my concern would be that in effect is a policy change, and that there should be council input on a policy change, even if it's a change in administrative or enforcement protocols. And I just want to make that comment because if we don't have a history of putting mitigation fees on undesirable species, there's no reason to start in the code. It's purely discretionary. And in terms of applying mitigation fees for mature trees that are on the designated list or protected list, that's also discretionary. And there may be good reasons for it, but I think if we should be, I think that the staff should consult with council if they're shifting the administrative protocol or changing it in any way from what's been practiced in recent years. My comment.
Okay. And well taken. I'm trying to wrap my mind and see how it kind of relates to the code enforcement issue that's on. I definitely agree with you on your explanation. I just don't want to make sure that we're on topic too.
Well, if there's a complaint on the removal of a mature tree, then they need to, they're stopped.
Uh-huh.
They need a permit to do that removal of mature tree. But then on top of the removal of mature tree, if there's a change in administrative protocol with respect to the mitigation fees on top of that, that becomes a code compliance matter. That's all I'm saying.
And I think the vehicle to address that will be when the tree ordinance comes up for discussion.
Okay. Yes. Okay. Councilmember Haney?
I agree with Matt. I don't think we want to beat these trees to death tonight.
I want to water them.
Tell me.
Everybody want to water their trees.
Any other comments from council members in regards to code compliance report? I remember when we brought this up, the code compliance officer, when we talked about getting, obviously, the year report on it, but we also talked about the first year being more of an educational year. And I just want to make sure, and we talked about having just a report on what we did to educate the public on these compliance issues. So I appreciate this report, but on top of that, I just want to make sure that we stress what we're doing to do outreach to the public. I understand that we do want to enforce these codes, but at the same time, since we went from not enforcing them to fully enforcing them, I want the public to know that we're not just taking completely just making them go by the code from one year to the next. Am I making stuff clear?
So our initial approach is always voluntary compliance. But there are still situations where we go beyond that if we don't get cooperation, especially where there's a safety issue involved.
Okay.
I don't think that's really inconsistent with what we've done in the past. For example, with hedges, we have gone out in the past and surveyed the city and required people to cut back their hedges because of safety considerations. And we would still obviously seek voluntary compliance first, but potentially go beyond that if we don't get compliance. On other things like lighting, clearly you've said until we get to the point where we feel comfortable enforcing the lighting, that's totally on a voluntary basis.
I'm glad to hear.
I had one more question.
Yeah, Councilmember Haney.
You know, on the training of these officers, how do we train them, or how did you train them?
So with, with the budget that we had and the people that applied for this position, most of them were pretty green coming in, we didn't get anybody who had done code enforcement before. So we started out from square one with most of these folks. And so we work as a team. Stephen Stewart and I the building official work together, and we set them up, and we first, couple of weeks, somebody that either a building inspector or Steve Stewart went out with him when he was out in the car. And when they felt that he was trained well enough to be able to be out in the car and observed and know the protocol and to interface with the public, then he was allowed to go out on his own. The reason that he isn't issuing citations is another step in his training that he has to take. He has to take a class in order to do that. So at this point in time, if there was something that escalated to the point of needing a citation, it would have to come up to Steve Stewart for him to then be the next person that would go out and take care of it as a higher official. So we've been working as a team and training him and encouraging him to take these classes that are any kind of building official or building inspector. There's a whole series of classes, many of them taught at Ventura Community College. And so that's one of the ways we were working with them. And then, day to day with staff, and we have work out with the city attorney if there's something we think that needs to be elevated to him. And we have staff meetings between Steve Stewart, myself, and Vince, talking about the issues and working with him and giving him direction. So it's pretty hands-on for the first, I'd say, 3 months or whatever point we're at now. Pretty hands-on. A lot of code enforcement activities require a lot of documentation. If it would end up in court, it's all about documenting when you're out there and who you speak to and date and pictures, et cetera, et cetera. So there's a lot of documentation for those cases that may end up in court. So a lot of that's just a lot of hands-on training. That's what we were doing. And that's why I think it's really difficult when that particular position was lost to the city to backfill it, because it can be you can get yourself in a lot of trouble and maybe possibly either by violating someone's rights or just politically. So we were very careful about how we let somebody go off into the community and interface with them. And the direction that was given to him was to be very educational in his approach. Gee, you might not have known, but this is this or that is that. So that's what he's been doing most of the time he's been out there. We're very lucky that the people here in Ojai tend to be very responsive. And for like the hedges, we've gotten really good response from people, complying with it. Gee, I didn't know, and I'm going to go ahead and take care of that. So we're kind of lucky that way, in that a lot of people are very responsive. But if you look at the code enforcement list that we talked about the other day at Planning Commission, you'll see that there are some that have stayed and floated there, the aging ones, and those are ones that are typically difficult, and we have to turn over to the city attorney or have some other methodology to deal with them. So that's kind of how code enforcement triage is as you work on it. Eventually you just identify those people that aren't going to be cooperative, and there's not a resolution to had through education.
Well, I guess my concern is maybe it was through the RFP, maybe we weren't. Maybe we weren't more demanding of what we expected of this individual that we were hiring, because some of the complaints that I get are the fact that he didn't know, let's say, construction permits, or he didn't know, some of our ordinances, or he didn't know them, period. So, again, that's why I asked, what I'm hearing is, to be able to write a citation, he has to be certified.
Yeah.
And again, in hindsight, maybe that's something that we should have put in our RFP, is that he or she had the ability to write citations. That way we knew going in that this individual had this training. That's all. I'm looking at hindsight, looking at some of the issues we've had in the past, and that's why I'm asking that.
I will say that having done code enforcement in other cities, a code enforcement officer can be very highly trained when you get them to do all aspects of code enforcement, including, vehicles and those types of things that normally the police or fire would take care of. And the higher certificates that they get, and the more training they get, and more abilities, the higher the cost. It's just the way it goes, just like anything else. When Councilman Weyer was talking to me about the priorities for the hedges, I do need to explain that the code enforcement officer would not, in and of himself, have the skill set to ascertain what is the most serious impediment to traffic site clearance. He can work on the issue of, is it violating this, is it taller than this, is it that, but to compare different intersections, that's a traffic engineer. So he would have to come back to us, and we would have to do some additional outreach to maybe Greg Grant and have him and rank them, and then Vince would be able to then implement that. But that's the level of code enforcement inspector or code compliance inspector we have right now. More along the lines of implementing either a straight code or implementing some other, analysis that the proper professional has done, whether it's an engineer or someone of that caliber.
Council, any further questions, Councilmember Haney? No?
I think
Councilmember Wyrick?
this has brought out a good point, and maybe it's a good idea that we've tabled that RFP. I think I would urge all of us to take a real close read of the RFP with respect to issues just like that. When we come back and discuss it next time. Yeah.
Good point. And I thank you for clarifying, because I was reading cases as pure citations or stuff like that, and that's where I think I would kept thinking about what direction. So thank you for clarifying that. I absolutely appreciate it.
I will just say this, just so that you understand. When Vince talks to somebody and we send out a letter, the feeling from the public is that they've gotten a citation. It's stinging sometimes to people, and I always clarify, well, I understand you're upset you got a letter, but it's just a educational letter. I mean, no one wants to get something like that from the city, but so sometimes you may get complaints from people where they feel like they've had a citation, but we are not. They're all educational letters sent out.
Thank you.
One final thing on that is, I did ask that in the planning session too, was when we receive something like this, we don't know what actions have taken. And I understand that some of those actions might be private. But again, we know that something was cited, but we don't know at what level it is. Is it a level 1, which is a phone call? Is it a level 2, which is a letter? Is it a level 3, which is an actual citation? Is it a level, you know what I'm saying? I don't know if we can create that in the process, but I think it would be beneficial to us. And I think even the planning commission seemed, I had a sense that they would have even appreciated some form of understanding of what the level is versus cases completed.
Well, I know that Mr. Summers indicated that he'd be looking at that so that we would have the knowledge of what we could include in the code compliance activity log that goes out twice a month without jeopardizing cases or causing angst to someone who's had somebody complain against them, but it hasn't been verified, which is what we're trying not to do. So he's going to work on that, I believe.
And
Well,
that is
thank
on
you.
my desk.
Thank you. All right, well, we're going to table item 6. I'm going to close as a city council. I'm going to convene as the Ojai Redevelopment Successor Agency, and I will entertain a motion for the minutes.
Motion to approve the consent calendar?
Second.
Roll call.
Flap.
Yes.
Wyrick.
Aye.
Haney.
Yes.
Blatz.
Yes.
Laura.
Yes. And then item number 8, recognize obligation payment scheduled. I'll turn it over to staff for a report.
Just turn on, there we go. Good evening, Mr. Mayor. Under the current structure we have with the redevelopment and successor agencies, we're required to submit our recognized obligation payment schedules every 6 months for the following 6 months. And we're in the process of doing that right now. As part of that process, we need to have the successor agency board to approve this, and then once it's approved by the successor agency, we will take it to the oversight board. And we're scheduled to go to the oversight board with this item on September 2nd. It has to be filed with the state by October 5th. There's nothing unusual. The only item that we actually are requesting at this time is the administrative costs that we incur on behalf, that the city pays costs that are reimbursed by the redevelopment successor agency.
77,000.
Yeah, 77,000. We had been requesting the full 125,000 that was allowed in previous years, but to the extent that money is not spent, then the state takes that away from your future reimbursements. And we've, as things have started to wind down, we have less costs that are actually being needed for taking care of administering the redevelopment successor agency. So that's why that number has gone down. I would make a note that in part of this, we have these prior period items in there, and we did not receive the full loan repayment from the ROPS 1516A that we did 6 months ago, because there's some formulas that are Department of Finance and the County of Ventura. They follow these formulas to determine how much can actually be reimbursed, and under the formula, they disallowed about approximately $90,000, if I remember right, of expense or of that reimbursement for the loan that the city has made to the redevelopment agency. On this, we're requesting their consideration to have this provided to us now, and so we're hoping that, you know, as we go through this process and the review process with Department of Finance, that they will be able to reimburse that. If not, we'll get it at some point, but we would like to get it sooner rather than later. So,
Any questions for staff? If not, then entertain a motion.
Move approval.
Second.
Roll call.
Clapp. Yes. Wyrick.
Aye.
Haney.
Yes.
Blatz.
Yes.
Laura.
Yes. Reports from council members. Councilmember Wyrick?
Oh, we're going to go with that, huh? Okay, very short. Councilperson Clapp and I have had a focus group meeting, made some decisions on the vacation rental matter, been doing further research, have called for another focus group meeting on August 31st at 4 p.m. We're closing in on a recommendation to council, which I'm going to very generally summarize without specifics. Number one, on the choice of a complete ban versus allowed with licensing and restrictions, I'm pretty sure that our recommendation, the focus group recommendation is going to be the latter. A licensing requirement with, stipulated restrictions, okay? I believe that that's the direction we're going, not the current situation, which is basically permissive whatever you want because we've suspended enforcement, and not a complete ban, but something in between as the best way to be consistent with the general plan and protect Ojai's character. So I just want to give a heads up to that. And also whether the majority of the council feels comfortable with the two of us on the ad hoc committee approaching Mr. Summer for an analysis of the way an ordinance might be structured conceptually with respect to licensing and restrictions on what you could do with those licenses, if that's okay with the majority.
Well, I think we have to table you have to make the
Okay,
item
that's true.
agenda too.
Okay. But I wanted to give the report.
Well, is he asking for approval to
Approach Mr. Summers.
approach Mr. Summers for additional hours?
Yeah. Well, and my understanding is if it's not on the agenda, we can't give that recommendation.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
But
So
that's what we're going to be,
Yeah.
we'll be asking for that.
Yeah.
But
What were the two things?
the two things would be a conceptual review of how a licensing requirement for vacation rentals would be structured and how it would work and how that could interact with restrictions on vacation rentals with that license in various
May I-
options.
And is there any, we talk about this?
Well, we could only talk about it.
It's a short report.
It's a short, and I have questions too. So again, I would refrain to asking further questions until we put this on the agenda.
We'll be having a meeting. I think we'll be ready after the August 31st to come back for discussion.
Okay, great.
Okay.
And real quickly, I'm a little confused about being able to ask Mr. Summers questions about the direction that the subcommittee is going to make sure that we're going in a legal direction so that we come back with a legal proposal. So is a subcommittee allowed or not allowed to consult with the city attorney?
I think the subcommittee is allowed to consult with me on questions. And I think it'd be a matter of, I don't know if we need formal council action to direct me to work with the subcommittee. It's already built into the existing contract. Then the question would be whether it's part of the retainer hours or a special project. I think the current protocol is that the council can approve special projects, and the city manager has approved a special project or two. So I think all it would take is a consensus in council that that'd be an appropriate special project, and I don't think that would need a whole separate agenda item. but if anybody objects, then.
And I think, just as a statement, I think I can speak for Bill, that we would be, certainly be very prudent about our use of the city attorney and make sure that the hours were very, very, very minimal.
And I think I definitely trust the ad hoc committee to doing that. And I think that's an approach that Councilmember Haney and I also are taking, is being really
In
prudent.
the other ad hoc committee at the moment.
And making sure that we don't dive into something that's going to be time consuming. I think that's actually a really appropriate. So I appreciate the quick summary. And
Okay.
any other
Will do.
reports, Councilmember Clapp? No? Councilmember Haney?
No, other than I would volunteer myself to be Bill's backup to the Ojai Valley Sanitation District.
Thank you.
So just.
I'll call you.
Mayor Pro Tem Blatz?
Nope.
Now, I do have a couple announcements. The first one is that we got a press release for birds test positive for the West Nile virus. So I talked to your city manager about possibly doing a link, because they're not supposed to contact the city. They're supposed to contact, I forget who it was.
County Environmental Health.
County Environmental Health. So the people out there in the community, just so that you're alert that has been detected here in Ojai. And then also, I just want to congratulate all the students that started school. My kids' first day, they were extremely ecstatic. I got a first-year-old, a first grader, and a fourth grader, and then which includes all the private schools, and then people that are starting colleges. So just want to wish them a good year. And then any reports from our city manager? City attorney?
Nothing additional. Thank you.
I have a question of the city attorney.
Oh, yes.
I'm sorry.
Councilmember Wyrick.
Happy to help.
I've read the second unit resolution. I mean, the second, we never actually had a resolution that we passed. We had a series of bullets that we passed, and then that was incorporated in this. We actually never,
Is that the most recent version?
Yes. Oh, I'm not sure. This is the one I got off the website
When?
this afternoon.
It's the most current.
Okay. Are they maybe and I just, I don't want to get into detail right now, but there's some discrepancies here between what I thought we passed by bullets and what's in here.
Let's just sit down and review.
And if that's okay, I'll just go through it with you.
Yeah, that'd be
Okay?
great.
All right.
Sounds good.
Okay. Anything from our chief police?
Down through July, I'm over 50%, which is really good. Because in other
parts of the county, it's trending up. So deputies have been making a lot of good arrests, and the public's also been calling in with tips. So we're doing real good. And then our Citizen Patrol has a brand new vehicle, so you'll see it out. It's a 2015 white Ford Escape. It's the first new vehicle they've ever had. Yeah, so it's gas efficient. It's like a small little SUV looking thing. So they're extremely happy about that, and we'll be looking at putting on another Citizen Academy here in the fall, our fall academy.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Wyrick.
We've been so busy with all these other things. I just wanted to personally congratulate you and your people, because we are not seeing the trend. What he just said is so significant.
Mm-hmm.
There's a trend of increasing crime. The downward trend for years has been reversed in many other cities, including Ventura County. And I think largely because of their efforts, we're not part of that. And I really personally congratulate you guys. You're doing a great job.
Well, we appreciate it. Yeah.
So I guess we would say business is not booming.
Exactly. A good thing. Yeah. Well, it's outside my pay grade.
Do we still have bike and foot patrols?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Good.
we'll put those on throughout the year.
Well, I just thought it was important to congratulate their efforts,
Yeah.
because this is really quite a story about how what's going on out of trend inside Ojai. It really is.
Yeah, and
I had a question about your, was it a job applicant for assistant deputy or?
For the PD?
Yeah.
No.
Where did I see that from? Why did I think it was from?
It's where the crime's trending up.
Oh.
It's and there's not. Hey,
While we have you, one other, how are you were putting a little more emphasis on people on bicycles?
Oh, you mean?
Not, blowing through stop signs
Yeah,
and
no,
things?
that's one thing, is that
And-
the traffic collision rate is up 20%,
Right.
and a good majority are bicycles.
Right.
And so I've been, we're actually working with the mob shop and a group of citizens. We're going to put together a bicycle rodeo, do some bicycle education, but we're also going to be going out and doing enforcement as well.
Yeah.
So it'll be education and enforcement, but I will be going out and having my officers focus on bicycles that are violating the law.
Yeah, we don't need one of those. It could already be a tragedy, but,
Yeah.
there's been instances in other cities where
Has.
we've had actually fatalities of
There's
pedestrians.
been 2 hit and runs, yeah. One,
From bicycle,
so.
blowing through stop signs and things, so.
Well, we're having, I participated in one of the meetings with the mob shop, and the mob shop was saying that their bike rentals is up significant. For example, on Wednesdays, they really have like 1 or 2. They were up by almost 30 rentals on Wednesday. So that speaks to the volume of people that are riding in the city.
Yeah.
The people that are getting in the accidents locals, or the people that are
I would
riding
have
the
to look.
bikes?
The ones that, to my memory right now, are locals, but there are some that are out of town, because we've gotten calls from them or their attorneys and whatnot asking for reports, and they are out of town as well. Probably a little bit of both if I were to delve into it.
I would really like to know where those accidents occurred. Do you happen off the top of your head
Yeah,
know
we
where
have,
they were?
well, not off the top of my head. We have a pin chart inside our briefing room where we document all the accidents, and then I guess.
Bikes.
Well, no, all the accidents.
All
I
the
would have to
accidents.
separate them out, yeah.
It'd be kind of nice to
Yeah.
see that.
Do you want me to
I'd like to
I
see
put some
the-
together, yeah.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Sure.
Great. Thank you, Chief. Anything else, Rhonda? With that, then I'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.